Chapter 151, 151, The Barrier Broke, 4 months ago. Chapter 151, The Barrier Broke.
Phew!
A man stirred in the dimly lit room. His expression was cold and unreadable, marked only by a conspicuous stitch running across his forehead. This was Kenjaku, who had lost possession of Suguru Gito's body after Gojo Satoru annihilated it. He had prepared a contingency, a backup body created from a fragment of his brain, sealed with a powerful curse that could only be lifted when the
Main body.
died. For Kenjaku, the distinction between main and secondary bodies was largely meaningless. He had transferred his consciousness countless times over centuries. Still, the death of the main body housing his brain was a novel and unsettling experience. Such a method came with limits. Dividing a piece of his brain, his true core, was akin to splitting a soul, but far more delicate. Unlike Sukuna's soul, which could be fragmented into multiple pieces, Kenjaku's division came at a great cost. Now awakened in this vessel after the loss of his original body, Kenjaku found himself stripped of all but his innate technique.
Such a shame, those two techniques were invaluable, especially cursed spirit manipulation. Its weaknesses were obvious, but it suited me well. Still, none of that matters anymore. I can simply observe how the pieces fall into place.
Rising with a slight stiffness, Kenjaku refused to brood on his setbacks. Over the past millennium, he had witnessed countless powerful techniques, yet pure strength was never his ultimate goal. Pursuit of raw power led only to an abyss of endless suffering. Even those stronger than him had come and gone. Wasn't he the sole survivor of his era? Even Sukuna could only be reborn by taking the form of a curse. From ancient times, humanity has sought power endlessly. Above that lay a higher ideal, true eternity, not mere longevity, nor Tenjin's fractured existence but genuine immortality, guided solely by one's will. Kenjaku had once attempted that path but was discouraged by repeated failures in his quest for godhood. Now, after long years, he was trying again. Success would prove this path viable. His excitement rose, dispelling his earlier despair. He approached the lone table in the sparse room, where a box sealed with talismans rested. The intricate seals formed a small barrier only removable by specific means. With practiced ease, Kenjaku opened the box and withdrew a pulsating mass of flesh glowing with an eerie purple light. Holding it briefly, he nodded in satisfaction.
It's time!
Muttering softly, he crushed the mass. The flesh burst with intense purple light before gradually dissolving into the air. Leaving the room, Kenjaku stepped into the desolate courtyard, the only structure for miles. He glanced at the distant sky, sensing the network of barriers across the country. At that moment, a strange phenomenon rippled through all 8 barriers nationwide. Black blood seeped beneath the earth, nearly undetectable under concrete-covered cities. Only where natural soil remained could it be noticed. Simultaneously, the barriers that had long tormented the Jujutsu world began to crack. First, the sky curtain shattered, revealing bright sunlight. The fragments vanished midair as the entire barrier collapsed.
Let the game begin!
Yorazu was on the verge of surrender. Kamihara Hajime's tactics showed that he could disregard even suicidal risks. Her body would likely be saved immediately, no matter what. Transcending life and death, defying the rules.
Such a technique is terrifying.
To maintain her combat effectiveness, Yorazu had reconstructed her insect armor countless times during the prolonged battle, draining precious resources including true sphere and domain expansion. Yet Hajime continued fighting both her and Sukuna simultaneously. The scales were tipping. A fiery rocket launched by Sukuna struck Hajime. Though in a weakened state, Hajime dodged most of it, but the edges grazed him, flames spreading instantly like ink in water. Yet Hajime stood firm, seemingly unaffected. The fire surged around him, spreading more than 10 meters before quickly dissipating. He had immediately used a surge of cursed energy to expel the flames from his body. Sukuna's attack, weakened as it was, couldn't overcome him. His hands glowed faintly red, radiating heat, though they appeared normal. Hajime knew embers still burned within, requiring constant suppression by his cursed energy. This was a temporary fix. Eventually, the embers could reignite deadly flames. Still, he only needed to endure for now.
True growth comes only from facing worthy opponents.
In close combat against four-armed Sukuna, Hajime had adapted from initial struggle to strategic withdrawal. Sukuna's extra arms gave him overwhelming attack frequency. To survive, Hajime had to avoid drawn-out engagement, striking quickly and retreating before Sukuna could overwhelm him. Experience and adaptability mattered more than technique. Both understood each other's weaknesses, but neither could exploit them decisively. The battle was now a contest of strengths, and the advantage was leaning toward Hajime. As Hajime's technique recharged, he prepared to end the fight. Entering time null state, Hajime appeared before Urazu, who was visibly weakened. Even without Gojo's 6 eyes, he could tell she was far from her initial strength. Few could withstand consecutive domain expansions. Only Hajime, Gojo, and Sukuna had achieved it. Hajime struck Urazu's abdomen, shattering her insect armor. Seeing Tsumiki's frozen face, familiar yet distant, he silently promised.
I'll get you out of this soon.
A radiant amber light enveloped Urazu. She was like an insect trapped in amber, frozen in time. This technique, combining high-intensity forward and reverse cursed techniques and borrowing principles from barrier methods, created a state similar to time stop but affecting only the target, preserving their thoughts at that moment.
Now I only need to keep Sukuna from breaking this seal.
As the battlefield slowly shifted, Hajime awaited Yuji Itadori's awakening, but if they failed?
Itadori!
Hajime asked cautiously, stepping back as Sukuna's extra arms withered to dust. The sinister aura faded, the second eyes beneath his eyelids closed. His eyes were gentle, confused, searching. Upon seeing Hajime, surprise confirmed his identity.
Hajime-senpai.
Relieved, Hajime asked.
Do you feel like you suppressed Sukuna?
Itadori's bewildered response chilled him.
Senpai, didn't you eliminate Sukuna? I can't find him.
Before more could be said, both noticed a new anomaly.
The barrier.
Chapter 152, 153, Sukuna is back, 4 months ago. Chapter 153, Sukuna is back. Calling it a tree wasn't entirely accurate. It was more like a towering pillar of warped flesh and blood. The grotesque mass twisted upward, its top branching into irregular growths that vaguely resembled the gnarled limbs of a withered tree. It was first discovered after the barrier collapsed, when supervisors arrived to investigate the aftermath. By then, the pillar already stood 3 or 4 stories high, and it continued to grow before their eyes. This tree of flesh and blood wasn't just disturbing, it was deadly. During a reconnaissance mission using a cursed technique with a cursed corpse, one supervisor grew careless and ventured too close. A thorny whip lashed out from the trunk, impaling him instantly. His body was dragged into the structure and fused with it. The same fate awaited the inanimate cursed corpse. It didn't discriminate. Anything with cursed energy was a target. The surviving supervisors fled and reported the anomaly. But the tree continued to grow, swelling from the height of a house to a monstrous skyscraper. By the time Jujutsu High's elite arrived, the tree of flesh and blood was so massive that Kamihara Hajime and the others could see it looming above Tokyo's skyline from far away, an isolated monstrosity in the steel jungle. Outside the designated safe zone, Shoko Larry hurried over with several documents, briefing them on the situation.
After urgent investigation, we found countless strange growths underground beneath this tree, its roots. The tree itself is in Tokyo, but its roots spread to multiple locations.
Gojo Satoru scanned the abomination and finished her thought.
Those locations are the other barriers, aren't they?
Yuri nodded gravely.
It attacks anything with cursed energy within range. Doesn't matter if it's alive or not, it strikes indiscriminately.
Gojo's gaze sharpened.
It's an aggregate of cursed energy, immense, dense.
Hajime crossed his arms.
Is this Sukuna's trump card? Should we just destroy it now? Not yet.
Yudor Akatsu cut in.
Your domain expansion isn't wide enough for this, and if its roots are spread underground, we could trigger something worse. This whole thing feels.
The anomaly had manifested suddenly. As usual, Gojo's teleportation technique had brought Hajime and Yuta first. Others would follow.
This thing reminds me of Kenjaku's domain.
Gojo murmured. Hajime frowned. Gojo-sensei had once explained that open-ended domains often shared certain unique traits, and this growth certainly fit the description.
8 barriers, another Kenjaku scheme.
Hajime said darkly.
And now this thing appears in all of them. Orochi.
Yuta's voice dropped.
The same number. That's no coincidence.
They tested it first. Gojo condensed a shimmering point of cursed energy at his fingertip, firing it toward the trunk. The blast vanished into the flesh like a stone sinking into deep water, leaving only faint ripples.
Its own cursed energy is enormous.
Gojo observed.
It swallows weaker attacks whole, and
Soon the rest arrived: Kashimo Hajime, Yuki Tsukumo, Megumi Fushiguro, and Yuji Itadori. Kashimo wielded the spiritual sword Butsu Mitama, lightning crackling along its blade. With a charged swing, he sent a crescent-shaped cursed energy slash into the trunk. Flesh exploded outward, raining down like crimson mist.
effective again.
Yuki Tsukumo stepped forward, unleashing her.
Round wheel.
A long, segmented cursed spirit she rolled into a sphere. She kicked it with such force the air tore audibly. The impact dented the tree deeply, creating a massive crater in its trunk. Kashimo followed up with another lightning strike, expanding the wound. The tree shuddered under their combined assault. Then Yuji froze, eyes narrowing.
Wait!
The statement silenced the group. As Sukuna's former vessel, Yuji's intuition in such matters couldn't be dismissed. Hajime exhaled sharply.
Then maybe this thing is incubating Sukuna's body, like some kind of cursed chrysalis. Or another unknown cursed spirit.
Yuta added. Gojo's expression darkened.
It might also be tied to Orochi. No techniques yet, destroy the above-ground part first.
Yuki and Kashimo became the main attackers, hammering the tree with basic but devastating strikes. Soon, the abomination retaliated, tentacle-like appendages whipping toward them.
Tiger funeral, savage bite.
Megumi's shadow expanded, forming a massive tiger's maw that tore into the tentacles.
Heavenly lightning.
Kashimo's amplified strike shredded the rest. The counterattack was crushed instantly. Then a new threat emerged: rain, but not water, blood. Gojo expanded his barrier to shield the group as black-red droplets painted the ground. The rain seeped into the cracked earth, spreading like a dark, pulsating web.
The tree is shrinking.
Gojo noted. Indeed, the towering monstrosity was steadily decreasing in height, though no less disturbing. Megumi acted next. He summoned the fused Shikigami, Ushioni, which charged with horned fury into the tree's base. The impact nearly toppled it. Yuki's round wheel followed, smashing another crater. Kashimo struck again, and finally Gojo's
Red.
obliterated the last resistance. The trunk split at the base, the colossal structure beginning to fall.
Wait!
Gojo's 6 eyes flared.
This isn't from our attacks. Something inside it changed.
Before it hit the ground, the entire structure began dissolving into mist. The blood rain intensified until it seemed the sky itself bled. Then it ceased as abruptly as it began. Silence settled, the ground steamed with the stench of iron. Drops of altered blood seeped from underground and began to rise into the air.
It's not me.
Hajime said sharply when eyes turned his way.
It's...
Yuji's voice was tight. That familiar, suffocating presence, he could feel it again. The ascending drops halted midair, fusing into a massive crimson sphere before slamming down. The blood didn't splash outward but instead curled inwards, blooming into the shape of a vast scarlet flower.
Everyone!
Chapter 153, 154, A New Form, 4 months ago. Chapter 154, A New Form. A tall figure emerged from the blood mist, towering over 2 meters, perhaps closer to 3, far beyond the proportions of a normal human. His shadow revealed 4 arms, and behind him loomed a winding, serpentine silhouette. As the crimson haze thinned, the creature's full form came into view. His face was unlike anything human, defying easy description. The first word to come to mind was simply demon. The left half of his face retained a faint resemblance to humanity, but only barely. Below his purplish-black left eye, a massive vertical purple eye had grown in place of his cheek. It twitched and darted about with unsettling restlessness, its gaze carrying a malicious sneer. The right half of his face had left humanity behind entirely grotesque, scale-covered reptilian. A pair of slit-pupiled eyes glared with cold amusement, and his mouth stretched in an exaggerated arc toward his ear, bearing jagged fangs with the slightest twitch. His forearms were thick with muscle, ending in claws that could shred stone. His lower body, too, had taken on a monstrous form. The coiling shadow behind him was a long tail, covered in the same dark scales that armored most of his body. He wore no clothing, yet the sheer inhumanity of his presence made it seem unnecessary. This was a predator, not a man.
Sukuna!
The name slipped into everyone's thoughts at once. The being emitted no wild surge of power, yet his mere presence radiated a crushing, contained malice. Sukuna inhaled slowly, savoring the air as if it carried some deep pleasure. All four arms spread wide as though welcoming the world.
It's been a long time.
He said, voice heavy with nostalgia.
Though judging by your faces, not much time has passed since the last time I died.
Hajime, meeting the cold stare of that vertical eye, ignored the question and instead asked his own.
That form of yours.
Sukuna's lips curved into a lazy smile.
You're perceptive. Kenjaku proposed an interesting idea. Becoming a god is one way to leave humanity behind, but what about other paths?
His four eyes glinted, the words curling like smoke.
Surpass humanity and power beyond human reach becomes possible. One path is a mindless curse, near unkillable. The other an existence that willingly abandons its humanity, becoming akin to a curse in will and form. One needs a body, the other needs consciousness. Together.
Hajime's instincts screamed that the truth was far uglier than Sukuna made it sound. Orochi's terrifying ability was likely at the heart of this transformation. If they had known of Orochi's existence 1,000 years ago, perhaps every elaborate scheme since had been to seize that power. A curse wearing the flesh of another curse.
Then how are we supposed to beat him? If he got Gojo-sensei's technique or Hajime-senpai's?
The thought of a Sukuna with time manipulation was enough to silence everyone. Sukuna waited patiently, as though their words were entertainment. Then he spoke, voice calm.
Are you done? Good, show me your limits.
One of his hands lifted. A wave of lethal intent rolled out like a crushing tide, forcing everyone to scatter. A moment later, the ground split open in a jagged gash stretching tens of meters. Rock, soil, everything had been sheared apart in an instant. This was Sukuna's cleave, but the devastation hinted he wasn't even using his full power. No one had time to dwell on it. Hajime and Gojo exchanged a glance and refrained from using techniques immediately. Megumi Fushiguro sent out his shadow Shikigami, Itadori and Kashimo, Hajime engaging in close combat. Megumi relied only on Kan for now, testing the boundaries of Sukuna's new ability.
This is bad.
Gojo murmured.
We don't know how many revives he has. 5 like last time or the theorized 8. Either way.
Hajime replied.
No techniques for now.
Gojo nodded, letting his cursed energy flow into raw physical reinforcement.
I'll be insurance.
Hajime realized that if his technique only affected allies or himself without meeting the conditions that triggered Orochi's copying ability, Sukuna might not be able to take it. That gave them a slim margin for safety. They struck at once. Sukuna fought with a predator's ease, 4 arms and 4 eyes allowing him to parry, counter, and retaliate in ways no human could match. Invisible slashes carved the battlefield, and every exchange seemed to favor him. A sharp whistle cut the air. Kan was severed mid-lunge. Thankfully, in its shadow state, it could be reformed. Megumi kept to the test, unwilling to risk his more dangerous summons until he understood exactly how Sukuna could copy abilities. But fighting Sukuna without full power was brutal. The first to fall was Kashimo Hajime. Lightning danced along his Butsu Matama as he met Sukuna head-on. The spiritual sword drew Sukuna's interest, his eyes tracking it with a predator's patience. The clash of claw and blade rang out, yet Sukuna's talons held without a scratch. Butsu Matama was not built for cutting. It was a vessel for its own unique power, and Sukuna was exploiting its limitations. A sudden shift, Sukuna wrenched for the sword. Kashimo twisted to protect it, falling right into his trap. The claws lashed out, but not for the weapon. They tore through Kashimo's chest. Blood sprayed, only to vanish. In the blink of an eye, Kashimo was whole again, Butsu Mitama back in his grasp. Sukuna's gaze slid toward Hajime on the battlefield's edge, lips curling into a smirk. A mouth split open across his abdomen, speaking in his voice.
I wonder how many times you can use that technique.
Then his power surged.
Domain expansion malevolent shrine.
The open barrier domain unfurled, its oppressive presence crushing down on all sides.
Can he copy a domain?
Yuki Tsukumo called out, tension in her voice. If Sukuna gained her ability, the thought was terrifying.
No.
Hajime answered sharply.
Closed barrier domains lose against open ones. Use simple domain or amplification.
Even so, a new idea formed. Domain clashes damaged both sides, the loser more, but the winner still paid a price. What if they cycled domains one after another? He shared the thought. Already, slashes tore into their defenses within the shrine. In the tense silence, Yuji stepped forward.
My technique's tied to Sukuna. He can copy it all he wants. I'll go first.
He stood in the center, untrained in domain amplification but protected by Gojo, his eyes locked on Sukuna.
There's something I've wanted to say to you for a long time, Sukuna.
His voice rose to a roar.
You bastard, pay for your sins.
Chapter 154, 155, All Against One 4 months ago. Chapter 155, All Against One. Evil extermination. Yuji Itadori's innate technique only worked if the target harbored malice toward him. And Sukuna.
This technique.
Sukuna muttered, eyes narrowing at Yuji. For the briefest moment, surprise flashed across his face. The sensation was familiar, the cursed energy's source was unmistakably kin to his own. He smirked.
I didn't expect an ant like you to gain this kind of power, but what use is it, witness?
Even as Yuji's strikes landed and fresh wounds blossomed, Sukuna seemed unbothered. The violet light in his eyes blazed, and with a ripple, Yuji's domain shattered. The warped reality dissolved, and they were dragged back into Sukuna's malevolent shrine. Slicing air and cursed energy slashes filled the space in an instant, but another domain bloomed over it almost immediately.
Unlimited void.
Gojo Satoru's voice rang out as his own barrier eclipsed Sukuna's. Gojo's domain didn't directly kill, so he expanded it without hesitation, shrinking it to a fortified, impenetrable capsule. Years of battle with Kenjaku had honed this tactic. Kamihara Hajime, moving in his time null state, seized the opening and materialized behind Sukuna's colossal shrine idol. The resistance felt weaker than expected. By Sukuna's displayed power, the shrine should have been guarded far more fiercely. No matter answers could wait. His twin blades, Tatsuka no Tsurugi and Anakiri, fell upon the idol. Only to screech against it like steel scraping steel. Sparks flew, but the surface barely dented. Hajime's cuts left shallow marks that began knitting themselves closed almost instantly. For open-type domains like this, destruction required one of two methods: overwhelm it with sheer power impossible against Sukuna, or push the caster to exhaustion before striking the core. Even though Hajime's time null couldn't dismantle the domain's framework directly, it could still weaken Sukuna enough to destroy the shrine in one decisive blow. But Gojo's barrier wouldn't last forever. Sukuna was already dissecting its structure, focusing his slashes where the defense was weakest. In moments, unlimited void cracked and fell apart. Without a word, Megumi Fushiguro stepped in, shadows pouring outward. Chimera Shadow Garden spread beneath their feet, another non-lethal domain, allowing full expansion. From its depths, the evil prison dog lunged at Sukuna, joined by coordinated strikes from Kamihara Hajime and others. The King of Curses met their assault with clinical malice. Inside his own terrain, with his technique amplified, his presence became monstrous. In a flurry of blows, Yuji's guard broke. A single slash bisected him midair. His vision spun as he saw the other half of his body drift away, before both halves shattered into cursed fragments. Time wheel reverse. Yuji reappeared, breathing hard, the memory of agony still fresh. Hajime reversed Yuki Tsukumo's wounds next, then those of the others. One by one, their summoned shadows fell. the evil prison dog's massive frame splitting into fading silhouettes as Megumi's domain collapsed. Sukuna's shrine was still intact.
This won't do.
Hajime Kashimo muttered.
I need to try something.
Cursed lightning surged as he unleashed his trump card, Take Mikazuchi no Mikoto, Fierce God's Calamity. The Butsu Mitama blazed with purple arcs, hardening into divine armor over his frame. Faster than sight, he was upon Sukuna. The blade tore through Sukuna's flesh, but the real devastation came from the lightning, which reduced matter to nothing. Sukuna's counterslashes met walls of sparking energy. For the first time in the battle, the King of Curses was on the defensive, regenerating as fast as he was carved apart. Yuji surged back in, evil extermination carving deep into Sukuna's cursed flesh.
Get lost, Ant.
Sukuna bellowed, blasting Yuji back with Dismantle, Spiderweb before charging a second strike. On the other side, Hajime Kashimo's lightning blade cut through the web's threads. Sukuna shifted tactics, multiple cleave and dismantle slashes fell toward Hajime as his other hands formed a bowstring. A burning arrow manifested. Flame arrow. Hajime Kashimo met it head-on. The impact birthed an explosion of fire that clung to his lightning armor like molten chains. In that moment's hesitation, Sukuna pierced straight through Hajime Kashimo's chest with a cursed blade arm. The lightning flickered, revealing his human body beneath.
Not breaking free from the shackles of humanity.
Chapter 156, King of Curses 1. The time wheel spun. Kamihara Hajime simultaneously activated his technique on both himself and the dragon shadow descending from the heavens. Sukuna's reaction was instant. Hajime needed perfect synchronization with the heavenly calamity Megumi Fushiguro had summoned, but Sukuna still managed to complete his domain expansion at the very last moment, using his second pair of arms and the gaping mouth on his abdomen. Entering the time null state, Hajime had one objective: cripple Sukuna before the technique's effect ended, then allow Megumi's Shikigami to deliver the decisive blow. If it worked and Sukuna failed to inherit the Shikigami's power, there would still be hope for victory. Even if Sukuna managed to replicate it, the danger would be far less than if he gained an entirely new technique. This was a necessary gamble. To maintain the flow of his strikes, Kashimo abandoned the use of the Butsu Mitama. Though sharper, the lightning bound to it had burned him earlier even without its power fully unleashed. That lightning was more than simple energy. It was Jujutsu in its purest, most destructive form. Destroying the shrine before had been unavoidable and the cost acceptable. Now, no restraint remained. Sukuna's body was not as unyielding as the shrine. The wounds inflicted by Itadori and the others earlier proved that. With Tatsuka no Tsurugi and Anakiri in hand, Kamihara Hajime launched his assault. He avoided Sukuna's potential weak points, not because they were fatal to the King of Curses, but because in this form they might not exist at all. Twin blades danced, blooming into a storm of death upon contact. In a flash, Sukuna's forearms were severed. From a distance, he was a grotesque statue, limbs hacked away, blood streaming. All the while, Hajime controlled the dragon shadow's descent, calculating the precise moment to cancel his technique so the colossal strike would land without carrying its temporal effects. The dragon shadow's speed was everything. Megumi's attack, for all its destructive potential, had its flaws. Like the piercing ox, it dealt the most damage in a straight, unbroken charge. For the dragon-shaped heavenly calamity, a vertical dive was best. The momentum was monstrous. Megumi had used this method to subdue Mahoraga after emerging from the dream realm. But the trade-off was immovable trajectory. Once committed, its path could not be altered without bleeding away the built-up force. Sukuna would notice. That was inevitable, and he had already completed his domain expansion. Hajime's eyes narrowed. The dragon's shadow touched the upper edges of Sukuna's domain, an unavoidable vulnerability. The moment of impact was seconds away. He withdrew instantly, his body vanishing from Sukuna's immediate reach. His technique released, and in Sukuna's perception, Hajime's form sagged as if gravely wounded. Above, the dragon shadow plummeted. Hajime's hand lifted, his technique ready to strike again. Sukuna weighed his options in a heartbeat. Dodging meant Hajime would simply reverse time and force him into the same danger. The alternative was to meet the threat head-on. He didn't hesitate. The dragon shadow entered the domain and was met with a storm of invisible slashes. Its flesh-split, sacred form reduced to ribbons, yet it pressed on relentlessly. By the time it crashed upon Sukuna's position, sound itself seemed to vanish. Then came the cataclysm. Lightning fused with water in a deafening explosion, the surging shadows transforming into a tidal wave that engulfed the battlefield. Sukuna's figure was swallowed whole. A shattering sound rang in every heart, the king of curses' domain fractured. Gojo Satoru stepped forward, shielding himself from flying debris before sweeping the dust aside with a wave of his hand. Where Sukuna had stood lay a massive crater, deep cracks spreading from its center. At its base, something writhed. Megumi's voice was grim.
Did he kill him?
Hajime's gaze was steady.
That depends on the state he's in when he reappears.
The writhing flesh swelled before splitting apart. Sukuna emerged, smiling coldly.
Better than I expected.
He had endured the heavenly calamity, sacrificing one life in the process, exactly as he had planned. With multiple opponents, he could afford patience. Now he would only grow stronger.
Second round.
His body expanded, two twisted horns sprouting from the purplish-black mass of hair. The sky blackened, thunder rumbling in the distance. Megumi's voice was tight.
He replicated the Shikigami's power.
Not fully.
Hajime said, eyes narrowing. Megumi made a hand seal, his voice low.
Buru Bura Yura.
Chapter 157, King of Curses 2. The second round began. The main assault shifted to Megumi Fushiguro, while Hajime and the others took on supporting roles. Even those like Kashimo Hajime, who didn't fully understand the entire situation, moved in sync under the unspoken coordination between Fushiguro and Hajime, asking no unnecessary questions. The moment they clashed with Sukuna, the scale of his transformation became terrifyingly clear. His power had grown immensely, so much so that apart from Yuki Tsukumo's technique, no one could withstand even a single blow. With the addition of Heavenly Calamity's abilities, Sukuna now commanded water, lightning, and even flight. Each strike, whether a punch or a kick, was wrapped in a burst of lightning or a stream of water. Rather than recklessly bombarding from above, Sukuna used his aerial mobility to full advantage in close combat, breaking free from gravity's pull to dodge, weave, and strike with lethal precision. Each time he touched the ground, it was only to channel more force into his next move. Lightning surged across his arm, forming a razor-sharp blade. In one swift motion, he forced back Kashimo Hajime and Yuji Itadori, then lashed out from an impossible angle. The lightning danced almost gently along his skin, but beneath that deceptive calm lay a killing edge. The shadows of Heavenly Calamity wrapped around Megumi failed to block the strike. The outer defenses shattered, and Sukuna's blade closed in. It was easy to imagine the destruction that would follow. His earlier strikes had already burned their ferocity into memory. But their teamwork showed its worth. In an instant, Gojo Satoru altered Megumi's trajectory midair, saving him from a fatal blow. Kashimo Hajime and Itadori immediately stepped forward, taking the brunt of Sukuna's next wave of attacks. To everyone's surprise, Itadori held up far better against Sukuna than expected. Sukuna's slashes caused him far less damage than they did others. Part of that was his absurd physical resilience, but the group suspected another reason. Itadori's technique likely shared the same origin as Sukuna's own. Still, Sukuna's intent to kill them hadn't weakened in the slightest. Even if he understood the truth of Itadori's technique, he wouldn't spare him. Itadori's binding vow pushed his technique beyond its normal limits, allowing him to rival Sukuna's relentless slashes in certain aspects. With Hajime as the rear guard, their chances of survival improved drastically. He maintained an unshakable safety net, ensuring that even lethal strikes could be undone before they claimed lives, but even sorcerers had limits. They weren't gods. Hajime's technique allowed him to maintain infinite cursed energy, similar to Gojo's 6 eyes efficiency. However, techniques weren't powered by energy alone, they also taxed the user's body. Just as electrical appliances burn out from overuse, sorcerers could suffer technique meltdown if they pushed too far too fast. Against Sukuna, that limit loomed ever closer. The King of Curses couldn't be defeated by a single person. Every time they killed him, his revivals came faster and stronger. Hajime rarely used his technique on others, as the strain was far greater than using it on himself. And Sukuna was patient. He didn't need to know Hajime's exact breaking point, he understood that sorcery always had one. Whoever reached their limit first would lose. Sukuna's body, twisted and reinforced beyond humanity, ignored injuries that should have ended any fight. Severed limbs and even his head reattached without bloodshed, revealing a structure no longer human beneath his scaled form. Hajime wondered if his four-armed figure was merely a preferred battle stance, and what monstrous form might lie beyond it. Rain poured down in sheets. Fushiguro's shadows formed a fanged jungle around Sukuna, locking him in. A lightning arrow from Kashimo tore through the sky, a massive spear of raw electricity, thick as a man's torso. Its presence alone made the air shudder, vaporizing rain into steam. Itadori and Yuki Tsukumo readied their next strike. Gojo and Hajime waited for the perfect opening, ready to intervene at any sign of disadvantage. Sukuna's four arms parried and struck in all directions, but the sheer number of opponents kept him from dominating.
It's almost time.
Sukuna's voice cut through the storm, his hands came together. Domain expansion, malevolent shrine. The familiar temple rose into existence. The last 3 times it appeared, it had nearly turned the tide in Sukuna's favor, forcing Hajime to undo countless deaths. Invisible slashes clashed with Fushiguro's death jungle, shredding it apart. Kashimo's lightning spear was sliced into scattered bolts before it could strike. Sukuna's hands shifted into a new Madrah. The shadows beneath him surged violently, and from them emerged a massive horned head, grotesque and bristling with power. A serpentine body followed, spiraling into the air. They all recognized it immediately. Heavenly Calamity, the fusion of 9 shadows, but this was no ordinary summoning. The dragon before them was several times larger than Fushiguro's own, its presence radiating sheer malice.
Now,
Sukuna said, standing before the shrine.
I have a helper too.
Chapter 158, King of Curses 3. There was no hesitation now in confronting the heavenly calamity Sukuna had summoned. Gojo Satoru stepped forward to face it alone. After a subtle exchange of glances with Kashimo Hajime, the latter understood Gojo's intent. Sukuna's flames were especially dangerous to Kashimo in his Butsu Matama state. If they could corner Sukuna again, he would be forced to use his flame technique to break Kashimo's transformation. Once that happened, and Megumi Fushiguro took it head-on, Mahoraga's adaptation to Sukuna would be complete. If Sukuna had no further trump cards, he could be killed outright. If he did have one, forcing it out now would reduce future risk. Take Mikazuchi no Mikoto, fierce god of calamity. Lightning swallowed Kashimo as the ferocious thunder god form emerged once more. He met the invisible slashes of Sukuna's domain head-on, his lightning armor splintering under the blows yet holding firm. Dazzling fragments of electricity scattered into the storm, but the damage was minimal. On the other side, the heavenly calamity incarnation of Sukuna that Gojo restrained proved equally resilient, refusing to fall quickly. For Sukuna, continuous domain expansion was now routine, but for Itadori and the others, the pressure was mounting. Last time, they had broken Sukuna's domain by combining their own. This time, they would have to shatter it by force breaking through his defenses and destroying the Buddhist altar anchoring it. With Gojo occupied, the others faced Sukuna directly. Hajime moved into a defensive offense rhythm, keeping the plan on track. Though less constrained than Yuki Tsukumo, he still felt the strain, even with Kashimo's transformation stabilizing the battle.
Eightfold, spiderweb, heavenly net.
A storm of fatal slashes tore through more than half of Kashimo's lightning armor, nearly exposing his true body. The scattered bolts were shredded further by the cutting net of Sukuna's strikes, until they were smashed apart by a sudden blow. Yuki Tsukumo had entered the fray.
Star Rage.
She stomped forward and unleashed a punch that made the air itself crack. The incoming slashes fractured under the sheer force, and before her golden hair could settle, the round wheel Shikigami uncoiled from her shoulder and shot forward like a cannonball. This cursed tool, enhanced by her technique, was no ordinary weapon. Yuki's star rage imbued her strikes, and the round wheel with imaginary mass without adding weight to herself. The result was devastating. A strike that moved at sorcerer speed but carried the mass of a mountain would crush anything it hit. Even Sukuna had learned to respect it. His countless dismantles and cleaves slammed into the spinning sphere, slowing it, but by the time it reached him, it had lost just enough speed for him to catch and redirect. He sent it spinning back, its absurd durability making it almost impossible to destroy. Though Yuki's attack didn't harm Sukuna directly, it bought Kashimo precious seconds to restore his lightning armor. He and Fushiguro closed in, Megumi clad in the shadowed armor of the heavenly calamity. This improvised combat method attaching a Shikigami's shadow directly to his body proved unexpectedly effective, granting both protection and offensive reach. Megumi's punch came with a burst of lightning, the shadow extending into a gaping maw toward Sukuna. The King of Curses blocked, his slashes cutting apart the shadow's shape. An elbow strike followed, breaking through Megumi's guard, and Sukuna's clawed fingertips aimed for his chest. Only for his arm to snap back with a sharp crack, Hajime appeared in his place.
Heavenly thunder-piercing arrow. Time wheel spin.
Chapter 159, King of Curses 4 out of 4. Flames engulfed Fushiguro, the red-black, ominous fire distorting the air around him. Only the faint silhouette of the time wheel behind his head marked his position. Even with heavenly calamity shielding his body and round deer mending his burns, this fire was beyond anything he expected. It didn't just feed on cursed energy, it scorched the soul itself. Within seconds, Fushiguro felt his endurance failing. If the cursed energy maintaining heavenly calamity and Mahoraga faltered, and with no mastery over reverse cursed technique, he would be reduced to ash. But Fushiguro was not alone. Kashimo Hajime, who had intercepted the earlier attack, moved past him to confront Sukuna. Lightning crackled around him like streaming ribbons of light.
Was the price worth it, just to shield him from this move?
Sukuna's eyes narrowed, his blade-sharp tone betraying suspicion. In a battle like this, such sacrifices were never without reason. So why let that boy suffer the flames instead? The answer arrived a heartbeat later. A figure appeared beside Fushiguro Kamihara Hajime. Using his technique, Hajime stabilized Fushiguro's condition but made no move to put out the fire. Sukuna's hands didn't pause. The dark dragon shadow coiled back to his side, while water gathered between his cupped palms. In seconds, a spinning torrent surged outward, condensing into a massive sphere that trapped Kashimo Hajime inside. The inner walls spun violently, sprouting countless blade-like ripples of water that began slicing inward. Lightning from Kashimo's body fizzled the moment it touched the sphere, dispersing harmlessly into the rotating prison. Occasional bursts ruptured the water curtain but never broke its structure. Sukuna's vertical eyes shifted toward Fushiguro again. Something about their actions set off alarm bells in his mind. His instincts screamed danger. Breaking away from Itadori and Yuta Akatsu with a blur of afterimages, Sukuna rushed toward Fushiguro. Behind him, Yuki Tsukumo and Kashimo Hajime shattered the water sphere, but the dragon's shadow rose again to block pursuit. Yuta moved first.
All phenomena are non-phenomena.
He vanished from sight, slipping past the dragon's shadow and reappearing directly beside Sukuna. Without Rika summoned so as not to burden Hajime Yuta's offense, relied purely on raw cursed energy. Time resumed. Sukuna's momentum broke as Yuta's strike smashed into him. His chest collapsed, half his head flickering between ruin and repair, the air lit with black sparks. Sukuna's sharp gaze cut toward the source. Hajime hadn't moved from his place, which meant
He copied that technique.
calm returning to his expression, Sukuna unleashed Dismantle, forcing the three closest fighters to back off. The dragon shadow surged in, slamming into Yuta. Rika's hand extended from the void, offering Yuta a cursed tool. Gripping it, Yuta refused to retreat. Fushiguro was at his limit. Yuta needed to stand his ground. He swung. Sukuna caught the blade in one hand, flesh refusing to yield. Yuta released the hilt too late. Sukuna's other hand slammed into him, sending him flying. A curse-forged blade hurtled toward him, Sukuna's hand signs complete.
Avoid vital points.
Yuta twisted midair, preparing to heal himself, when a figure suddenly appeared in front of him.
Dismantle.
The unstoppable slash struck an open palm and stopped. It rebounded harmlessly into the air.
That dragon of yours is really troublesome.
Gojo Satoru stood between them. Sukuna's mastery over Heavenly Calamity's abilities was alarming. During his clash with Gojo, he wielded its powers with uncanny precision, yet the dragon's shadow suddenly weakened. Finding its flaw, Gojo shattered it, only to discover it dissolved into water. Rushing back, he intercepted Sukuna's attack on Yuta with Limitless. Sukuna's rotating eyes caught something else. The flames on Fushiguro had vanished. Whatever they were hiding, this was the moment it would be revealed. Fushiguro, healed by Hajime's reverse cursed technique, spoke a single word.
Mahoraga.
The time wheel above his head completed its rotation, and the colossal, eyeless Shikigami rose from his shadow. Sukuna frowned. Mahoraga was clearly Fushiguro's Shikigami, yet it was not among the ones he had merged into himself. Mahoraga charged. Sukuna's opening slash failed to even scratch it. His punch to its abdomen had no effect. The blade on Mahoraga's arm grazed him, leaving a deep wound. Sukuna realized the truth. The weapon was condensed from reversed cursed energy, a natural bane to curses formed from pure cursed energy. While not absolute against his current form, it was still dangerous, and his own attacks could not pierce Mahoraga's body. Testing a theory, Sukuna summoned Heavenly Calamity's lightning, compressing it to a lethal point before striking Mahoraga's head. The blow left a gaping wound, but the Shikigami remained. Gojo seized the opening with a heavy punch, pulling Sukuna toward him with powerful suction. Domain amplification. Even with Limitless deactivated, Gojo could still use it strategically. Sukuna countered by merging guaranteed hit effects with his domain amplification, attempting to break through. Another lightning strike followed stronger than before, yet it only scorched Mahoraga's outer shell. The time wheel turned slowly, adapting.
So it's adaptation.
Sukuna muttered.
Every attack just makes you immune to it.
If he was right, the only way to destroy it was with a killing blow before adaptation could occur. And if that wasn't possible.
Open!
Chapter 160, Sukuna's Cursed Technique Backfires. There were no fire arrows or flashy movements. As soon as Sukuna completed his hand seal, blood-red flames ignited across Mahoraga's massive body. These ominous flames spread instantly, yet no one felt the slightest heat, as if they were looking at an illusion. But the way Mahoraga suddenly stopped struggling, and the confirmation Megumi Fushiguro received through his connection to his Shikigami proved this was no trick. Although these flames resembled the fire arrows Sukuna had used earlier, their essence was different. This was clearly a new cursed technique, and the result was predictable. Mahoraga's towering frame began to wither under the strange fire. Muscle tissue rotted away, breaking into black ash that drifted from its body. Along with it, its overwhelming strength faded. Even as it propped itself up with the blade on its arm, the Shikigami's adaptation ability could not match the speed of this destruction. Time wheel reverse. Without hesitation, Kamihara Hajime activated his technique, rewinding Mahoraga's body to its earlier state before it could crumble into nothing. This would reset its adaptation progress, but if he delayed, all their previous efforts would be wasted. Yet a strange sight appeared. Even after Hajime's reversal restored Mahoraga's body, the blood flames still clung to it.
How will you extinguish this rootless karma flame?
Sukuna said with a mocking smile.
Still,
The karma flame wasn't impossible to dispel, but Hajime faced another problem. While constantly reversing Mahoraga, he also had to deal with Sukuna's relentless pressure. Managing both at once was far harder than simply adding one task to another. He considered another option. If he stopped time entirely, the flames, being a form of cursed energy, might vanish when all energy flow was halted. But if he tried, Sukuna might be waiting for that moment to strike down allies or force Hajime to reveal more of his own cards. Mahoraga had become a lure in a deadly game where acting second meant victory. Sukuna already seemed to have the advantage, but was that truly the case?
Yuta Akatsu.
Yuta, preparing to expand his domain, immediately understood Hajime's intent and abandoned his plan. Technique forward, technique reversal. Time stop. An inviolable stillness blanketed Sukuna's domain. Every motion ceased inside and out, anything entering the space froze in place. The karma flames on Mahoraga hung motionless like a blood-red flower in mid-bloom. Hajime raised his hand, flooding the still air with his cursed energy. The flames peeled away from Mahoraga, dissolving into nothing the instant they left its body. Time resumed. Sukuna instantly realized what had happened, but before his smirk could form, the combined attacks of Itadori and the others struck. A deep gash split Sukuna's forehead downward. Itadori's evil extermination bit deep, but Sukuna's flesh broke apart into black shadows before their eyes. Megumi, stationed further back, felt danger at his rear. His reaction was immediate. Heavenly calamity burst forth from his shadow in the form of a massive dragon head wreathed in black lightning, lunging toward the intruder Sukuna himself, who had used the 10 Shadows' power to emerge from darkness. If Sukuna killed him now, their side would collapse, but if the dragon could hold him off, the others could respond. Sukuna reached out calmly. This was his domain. Countless slashes shredded the dragon head, scattering its scales before the attack ripped through Megumi's body. Blood sprayed, his torso shredded beyond recognition. Sukuna's grin widened until Megumi stood whole again before him. Hajime had predicted this assassination attempt and, despite the strain of his earlier technique, forcibly rewound Megumi's death. Before Sukuna could adjust, Yuta's strike blasted him away, shattering the Buddhist altar and destabilizing the domain. Domain expansion unlimited void. Gojo's domain clashed with Sukuna's, both shattering at once. Sukuna froze briefly, overwhelmed by the flood of information. Evil extermination. Itadori's strike tore into him. Furious, Sukuna unleashed a dragon-shaped torrent of shadow, lightning, and water, blocking further attacks.
Break!
Yuki Tsukumo's punch smashed the dragon into scattering droplets. Sukuna's wounds were already mending, but Mahoraga was free, and Megumi lived.
The so-called pawn exchange is a chain of trump cards.
Sukuna said coolly.
Unfortunately.
Open. A crushing weight fell over the battlefield. Movement slowed as though they were trapped in mud. The looming sense of death thickened in the air.
His cursed technique.
Gojo shouted. Hajime acted. Despite the lingering strain from earlier, he stepped into a time-null state, punching Sukuna the moment black light flared. Black flash. Again and again, 10 in total, each shattering the air with lethal precision. Sukuna crashed into the ground, a massive crater blooming beneath him. His strange technique still pressed on them, but the weight had lessened. Gojo, Yuki, and Yuta moved instantly. Yuki darted forward, her cursed energy burning like a star.
I've had enough of you.
Chapter 161, Collapse into Darkness. The hypothetical mass created by Yuki Tsukumo's Star Rage technique did not affect her own body directly. What she never mentioned, however, was that this applied mass had a ceiling, and if she concentrated that maximum mass into a single point.
Now!
Time wheel reverse. The black tide vanished as quickly as it had come. For Yuki, the moment felt like drifting through endless silence before consciousness snapped back. She blinked, finding herself alive and staring at the devastation she had caused. Sukuna was gone, round 2 was over.
If you'd used any more force,
Hajime said, walking toward her.
I would have had to pull you both back.
Judging from the manifestation, her move resembled his own domain in some ways, though far more extreme. Yuki grinned and patted his shoulder.
Then with you here, I can use it as much as I want. We're a perfect team.
Hajime's thoughts were less amused. Is she really this strong without even tapping into cursed energy fully? Out loud he warned.
If you miscalculate, you'll die for real.
Taking advantage of Sukuna's temporary absence, Hajime asked a critical question.
Can your technique reversal counter that move?
A ripple disturbed the massive pit before them as if the air itself were boiling. Yuki's smile faded. She kept her eyes fixed on the distortion as she answered.
In theory, yes. I tested technique reversal once, but it wasn't effective in combat, so I didn't practice much.
Reversal techniques generally do the opposite of the original ability. Yuki's, as Hajime guessed, reduced mass instead of adding it.
When I hit someone while using it, the force can fling them away.
She explained.
But it's useless on myself, and if I combine it with my normal technique, The effects cancel each other out.
Hajime frowned.
And Sukuna.
Her brow furrowed.
Is it that unbelievable?
It's not just that.
Hajime said grimly.
We're talking about the King of Curses, a master from the golden age of Jujutsu. He adapted Megumi's incomplete 10 Shadows technique almost instantly. His reverse cursed technique is monstrous. We'd be stupid to ignore the possibility he's already mastered your reversal.
Then it's simple.
Yuki replied.
We see if he lets me get close.
From the distorted void, a faint shimmer bled out, like a shattered mirror trying to piece itself together. Those who had retreated earlier now returned, all eyes fixed ahead. Without warning, a familiar figure emerged, 4 arms, 4 eyes, scaled skin. Sukuna revived again. As he shifted from spectral to physical form, his 2 upper hands and 2 lower hands formed different seals. His mouth, and the larger one on his abdomen, chanted 2 separate incantations.
Domain expansion, malevolent shrine.
2 of the seals were instantly recognized. One was his domain seal, the other.
Mahoraga.
Megumi's voice cracked in shock. Of course he would know it best. Could it be that when Sukuna killed Heavenly Calamity, he had received not an incomplete 10 Shadows technique, but the full one? Megumi shook his head.
No.
Hajime concluded. This time, Sukuna's domain manifested differently. Instead of the familiar open shrine, a pitch-black sphere enveloped him. Closed domain. Whether Sukuna had known this method centuries ago or learned it recently was irrelevant. Hajime and the others understood his plan immediately. He had reinforced the domain's outer shell to absurd levels. The point wasn't to trap enemies, but to keep them out. He wanted uninterrupted time to kill the newly summoned Mahoraga and finish the taming ritual. A flash of purple streaked across the sky. Gojo Satoru's hollow, purple hurtling toward the domain. Hajime already suspected it wouldn't break through. Sukuna had made the interior and exterior of his domain 2 extremes, impregnable outside, lethal inside. Normally, this would be idiotic. Domain expansion was designed for offense, and using it defensively risked the caster suffering burnout. But Sukuna's physiology broke those rules. Even during burnout, he could still unleash his fire technique. What he needed most now was time, and this was the perfect stalling tactic. Inside, only Sukuna and the untamed Mahoraga remained. Without a summoner's control, the Shikigami would attack instinctively. But the question was how long before it adapted.
We have to stop him.
Chapter 162, Clash of the Strongest.
This guy.
Hajime's assessment wasn't wrong. Once Sukuna drifted away from the battlefield, the second Mahoraga immediately locked onto the nearest threats, Gojo Satoru and Yuki Tsukumo, who were closing in fast. Meanwhile, Sukuna didn't stop moving. His wounds closed rapidly as he formed new cursed seals. The shadows beneath his feet surged like a black tide, spreading across a wide area. Something massive stirred within, sending ripples through the darkness. Hajime and the others were well aware of Mahoraga's nature. Unless it was destroyed instantly with overwhelming force, every other attack would only make it adapt and become impossible to kill. This meant Hajime's group needed to prepare a technique capable of killing it in one blow, while also finding an opening despite Sukuna's inevitable interference. And Sukuna's readiness to act at any moment made that far more dangerous. Even more troubling, killing Mahoraga right away wasn't the smartest choice. Hajime knew from Megumi Fushiguro that if the ritual failed, Mahoraga could be summoned again. Normally, this would burden the summoner and pose serious risks, but with Sukuna's current abnormal body, that burden likely meant nothing. The fight had now shifted into a strange state. Hajime's side had no choice but to interfere in Sukuna's ritual. This way, Mahoraga would remain on the field but at least wouldn't be completely under Sukuna's control.
In the end, we still have to kill Sukuna as soon as possible. Tsukumo moved too early. If Sukuna gets another clean opening, we'll be at an even bigger disadvantage. Judging by the pattern, Sukuna has only 5 resurrection chances, same as that incomplete Orochi before. That means, before the final moment, we need to kill him 3 more times while knowing he'll grow stronger each time.
While Hajime calculated their odds, the next wave began. Tsukumo charged toward Mahoraga, while Gojo circled wide, aiming straight for Sukuna. Gojo's earlier, short-range, instant purple had pierced Mahoraga but failed to finish it, triggering its first stage of adaptation. If he continued fighting it directly, he'd either have to reveal hidden techniques or risk Mahoraga fully adapting to Limitless. On top of that, Tsukumo's technique had been copied by Sukuna during his second resurrection. Judging by how quickly Sukuna had mastered it, he now wielded Cursed Technique Reversal, Star Rage. Not all techniques are equal. Some, like construction, are notoriously hard to reverse, but others, such as Gojo's Blue, which reverses into red, are relatively simple. Hajime's own time acceleration had an obvious reversal, time reversal. In Hajime's view, Jujutsu is highly subjective. If a sorcerer clearly understands their technique's reversal, mastering it after learning reverse Cursed technique becomes much easier. Tsukumo's Star Rage worked the same way, it added.
Imaginary mass.
The reversal was obvious mass reduction. She had mastered that long ago. But while useful for her, the reversal didn't hit as hard in combat. Lowering an enemy's mass might send them flying into the air, but Tsukumo preferred raw, overwhelming strikes, impossibly heavy blows capable of crushing anything. Her technique also had a limitation. It was easier to apply to herself than to others. Otherwise, she might have pushed mass reduction to the extreme, turning foes into beams of light or collapsing them into nothingness. In Sukuna's hands, however, the reversal was a real problem. If Tsukumo tried to crush him with her full mass, Sukuna could simply reverse it, lighten her mid-strike, and evade at the last second. And as for combining Hajime's time null state with Tsukumo's attacks to create a perfect black hole, that would be suicidal, wiping out themselves, the city, and perhaps even the country. Worse, Sukuna's resurrection seemed rule-based. Even if nothing of him remained, he could still reappear instantly. Killing everyone else in the process would only help him. For now, Tsukumo's best role was support stalling Mahoraga. The job of facing Sukuna directly fell to Gojo Satoru, the strongest sorcerer of today against the strongest of 1,000 years ago. Itadori's evil extermination could hurt Sukuna, but both shared a certain resistance to each other's techniques. Megumi had already used Heavenly Calamity to kill one of Sukuna's lives, but hitting him again with it was nearly impossible. Yuta Akatsu's copied techniques that could threaten Sukuna were limited. Copying Hajime's own power was dangerous, giving Sukuna the ability to copy others would be a disaster. Kashimo Hajime still fought using the unleashed power of his spirit sword, Butsu Mitama. Strong as it was, it still couldn't kill Sukuna outright. And Hajime himself.
Myriad snakes.
Sukuna unleashed a never-before-seen fusion Shikigami from 10 shadows. From the swamp-like shadows underfoot, countless snakes burst forth, smaller than Orochi, but overwhelming in numbers. They swarmed toward Tsukumo to slow her down, while Gojo's sudden attack marked the true start of the fight. Using Cursed Technique Reversal, Star Rage again wasn't an option. Sukuna knew it would leave him open. He'd already deduced Gojo's basics, attraction and repulsion, with purple being their annihilating combination. Instead, he used something far harder to counter.
Ashioni.
A massive arm shot from Sukuna's shadow, belonging to a terrifying ox-headed Shikigami. It swung its fist straight into Purple's path. Purple met the blow head-on, shattering the Shikigami's arm after a brief clash. But Hajime, watching from afar, realized Sukuna had reinforced that arm with Star Rage, blunting Purple's power. Sukuna raised his own arms to block the rest of the blast. Flesh vaporized but instantly regenerated. Then, a crushing pull yanked him forward. He increased his imaginary mass to resist, but Gojo wasn't just pulling him, he was creating a fixed point between them, closing the gap himself. A lightning-fast punch slammed into Sukuna's gut, piercing him as hands sprouted from Sukuna's ribs to grab Gojo's arm.
Domain amplification.
Only with this could Sukuna touch Gojo through Limitless, but Gojo smiled, his free hand flared crimson.
Cursed Technique Reversal, red.
At this range, the static repulsion burst would tear through anything. Sukuna abandoned his counter, forced back by the explosion. Gojo, unharmed within Limitless, used the opening.
Domain expansion, unlimited void.
Chapter 163, Domains. It was too late for Sukuna to retract domain amplification and then cast Malevolent Shrine. Gojo Satoru seized the moment, dragging Sukuna into his domain first and putting him in a precarious position. Though domain amplification prevented his mind from instantly disintegrating with an unlimited void, it functions only like a fortified simple domain. It neutralizes an opponent's sure-hit technique rather than nullify it, outright contrasting with the pure nullifying force of inverted Spear of Heaven. In short, domain amplification fights back but doesn't fully override a domain expansion. If Sukuna tried to pull back now, he'd still be trapped. Unlimited void would claim him, and he'd lose the chance to expand his domain afresh. Inside the domain, Gojo's range was limited. It encompassed only Sukuna, Yuki Tsukumo, and the second Mahoraga. To avoid being obliterated by Gojo's domain, Yuki activated Simple Domain for protection. Gojo didn't pause. While Sukuna was bound, he pressed the assault. Within the domain, Gojo's control was effortless. In an instant, he flickered behind Sukuna, a punch ripping across space and landing squarely on Sukuna's face. It wasn't a black flash, no cursed energy resonance occurred. Sukuna's face warped from the strike's raw force, but his vital defenses held. His current form was unnaturally sturdy, protecting him in a way expected only of a supremely skilled sorcerer. He shook off the impact and impolitely stabbed at Gojo with one of his 4 hands. Having multiple limbs granted Sukuna several simultaneous attack options, but Gojo countered with sheer technique. Jujutsu sorcerers often rely on physical combat infused with cursed energy rather than pure energy blasts, for several reasons. Energy efficiency: fist and foot strikes or cursed tools save cursed energy for prolonged battles. Body as conduit: the sorcerer's body is the best receiver and multiplier of their own cursed energy. Gojo's 6 eyes let him use cursed energy with near zero waste, so martial arts are rarely about saving energy for him but about control and adaptability. Yet, Gojo still trained in martial combat, partly honoring Suguru Gido, a master of both martial arts and shikigami, and partly because Gojo, born into genius, never let himself be outdone. In response to Sukuna's attack, technique reversal. A burst of repulsive force sent Sukuna reeling, disrupting his strike. 2 of his free hands flickered into a phantom form, pointing forward in an offensive pose.
Open fire arrow.
Gojo sensed the shift, the internal fluctuations, subtle yet distinct. In a blink, he vanished from sight. He detected something amiss, then teleported away before Sukuna could lock target again. A fire arrow requires that precise lock-on. Chapter 163, 164, Infinity and Rage, 3 months ago. Chapter 164, Infinity and Rage. The sensation of using Star Rage was intoxicating beyond words. Every punch, every kick movements that would otherwise be ordinary now carried an unimaginable force, enough to shake even a being like Sukuna to his core. At this moment, the world itself felt fragile. If not for the fact that Sukuna was still trapped within Gojo Satoru's domain, the battlefield would already have been torn apart by his bare hands. The very air had become tangible, warping and tearing apart under the weight of his strikes, each movement producing deafening shockwaves. And yet, this display still fell far short of the true limit of the technique. Despite this surge of power, the King of Curses was at a disadvantage. At point-blank range, Sukuna's 4 arms moved with deadly precision. His upper hands struck at Gojo from 2 unpredictable angles, while the lower pair joined together, summoning a concentrated sphere of lightning from the void. Gojo didn't need more than a glance to recognize the technique, a Shikigami ability from the 10 Shadows. But against Sukuna's mountain-splitting blow, Gojo simply extended his own hand, twisting his wrist as he clenched his fist. A sudden, invisible, repulsive force burst outward, shoving Sukuna's upper hands wide apart. The repulsion was overwhelming, yet it lasted only an instant before reversing into an equally fierce pull. Combined with Gojo's already launched strike, the shift in force robbed Sukuna of any chance to evade. Gojo's fist slammed into his abdomen at close range, the impact exploding outward with a black flash. His hand sank deep into Sukuna's flesh, nearly tearing through to the other side, and the shockwave detonated behind the King of Curses. the lightning sphere in Sukuna's grasp, almost ready to fire, sputtered under the blow. Yet Sukuna only bared his pale teeth in a feral grin, ignoring the gaping wound in his midsection and the damage to his organs. The remnants of his lightning flared back to life, and with a flick, he sent it hurtling at Gojo. The explosion forced them apart once again. No matter how devastating an attack was, it meant nothing if it failed to connect. Without relying on the absolute distance of Limitless, Gojo had manually adjusted their spacing with pure technique. Sukuna had been caught off guard at first, but he wasn't convinced he couldn't adapt to this rhythm if the fight dragged on. Still, he hadn't forgotten his current reality. He was inside Gojo's domain. His domain amplification was steadily eroding under the constant assault. One lapse in control, and it would shatter entirely, leaving him trapped in the unlimited void. The 10 Shadows lacked true domain-breaking power. Even his karmic flames were ineffective against this type of construct. Malevolent Shrine would have been the optimal answer, but Gojo had cut off that possibility before Sukuna could act. Star Rage empowered him immensely, but against Gojo's elusive technique, it wasn't quite enough unless...
Lightning Flash.
The crackling streams flared, compressing into a droplet of lightning-charged water. With a sharp, sonic crack, it shot straight at Gojo's forehead. Gojo's senses immediately locked onto the violent, cursed energy signature, his mind mapping its trajectory in an instant. As it screamed toward him, he leaned back in midair, letting it pass by a hair's breadth, an evasion beyond the reaction speed of ordinary sorcerers.
Blue.
A sapphire orb over a meter wide materialized before him, radiating an irresistible pull. It tore at everything in range, then hurtled toward Sukuna. The King of Curses responded instantly, merging his water and lightning ribbons into a thick, whirling barrier. The sphere slammed into it, not shattering immediately but straining against the watery shield. For a precious second it held, long enough for Sukuna to slip past, lunging forward. His other 2 hands locked into a seal. This time, flames bloomed not as arrows but a spear of pure fire, compressed and honed like tempered steel. He spun with the momentum of his charge, the weapon radiating heat fierce enough to scorch cursed energy itself. Gojo couldn't simply take the strike bare-handed. He fired red instantly. The spear met the Crimson Force head-on, erupting into a storm of fire and residual cursed energy. Through the haze, 2 more streaks of red tore forward, chasing Sukuna relentlessly. But Sukuna had prepared for this. In that fleeting moment, he fused his shadows again, summoning a monstrous, uneven form, the maw of the tiger funeral. The beast's shadow-dripping jaws snapped shut around both reds, swallowing them whole. The tiger funeral, last of the 10 Shadows' arsenal apart from Mahoraga, was pure aggression given form. In Sukuna's hands, it dwarfed even Max Elephant, its black abyss of a mouth erasing Gojo's attacks without a trace. A heartbeat later, a crimson flash burst out from behind the Shikigami, tearing it apart. The tiger dissolved back into shadows, not dead but dispersed. That brief delay was enough for Sukuna to vanish into the chaos, letting the remaining red streak pass harmlessly. Gojo pivoted instantly, striking at his right rear. 2 of Sukuna's arms caught the blow, forcing Gojo back. Sukuna followed in, his strikes aimed for Gojo's face and throat. Their exchange was a blur, fists, knees, and kicks clashing faster than the eye could track. Sukuna's blows were heavy as mountains, but Gojo redirected them with subtle shifts, flowing like water. The fight reminded him of the principles he'd studied: use softness to overcome hardness, weakness to control movement. While many jujutsu sorcerers favored brutal, direct combat, Gojo had learned from every style: ancient martial schools, modern combat systems, philosophies from East and West. He didn't need to master them all. Understanding their principles was enough to shape his approach. Even as Sukuna unleashed torrents of lightning and water without fully summoning a Shikigami, Gojo saw through him. The attacks were dangerous but not decisive, and they were burning through Sukuna's reserves fast.
Combined.
Gojo swept his hands outward, and from opposite sides, the earlier red and blue attacks returned, drawn together like magnets closing in on their prey. Sukuna sensed the trap, but engaging Gojo left no room for evasion. One lapse and the follow-up would be worse than the direct hit.
Heavenly Calamity, Wild Bite.
Shadows surged outward, forming a massive dragon that lunged to intercept. But Gojo's hands came together, guiding the converging orbs into each other.
Hollow technique, purple.
The blast engulfed Sukuna at point-blank range. The heavenly calamity was too late. The wave of annihilation tore through him, flinging his body across the battlefield. When the dust cleared, he rose again, battered and bleeding black from dozens of wounds. His regenerative speed had slowed. Then, without warning, black blood streamed from all four eyes. In that instant, he saw it infinity crashing down on him, drowning him completely.
It's time to end you.
Gojo blurred past the uncontrolled heavenly calamity, moving to finish it. But then, from behind, a surge of cursed energy spiked, the coiled dragon shadow twisting unnaturally, its body warping into something deeper and darker than before.
Star Ray.
Chapter 164, 165, Satoru vs Sukuna, 3 months ago. Chapter 165, Satoru vs Sukuna. The dragon shadow, once a nearly indistinguishable silhouette, was now a collapsing mass that pulled everything around it inward. Gojo Satoru recognized the phenomenon instantly. It was the same devastating technique Yuki Tsukumo had once used to end Sukuna's second life. Gojo had considered the possibility that Sukuna might resort to a similar mutual kill tactic if pushed to the brink, but he hadn't expected him to recreate it through a Shikigami. Yuki could never use her round wheel as the collapsing medium. While the wheel could channel her technique under normal circumstances, forcing the hypothetical mass it carried into total collapse would destroy the wheel before the process could complete, dissipating the chain reaction. But Heavenly Calamity, the fusion of the 10 Shadows' most fearsome entities, was a different matter entirely. Sukuna's actions confirmed it. Judging by the way the collapse was accelerating, it would reach the point of recreating a black hole in seconds. Heavenly Calamity could substitute for the sorcerer entirely, carrying out this apocalyptic final measure. Yuki had avoided self-destruction by relying on her partner's technique. Sukuna avoided it by layering and coordinating his arsenal of cursed techniques. Even under the effects of unlimited void, he could still maintain control over the collapse. Gojo, for the moment, had no opening to exploit. The implosion's speed was blistering. Most of the time was spent on the hypothetical mass reaching critical density. Once it did, the destruction was instantaneous. And now Gojo found himself standing squarely within its likely blast radius. At the start of the battle, he had deliberately split the battlefield from Yuki's to keep Sukuna from using Mahoraga against them both. It had been a fortunate precaution. At least Yuki was out of range. All he needed now was to escape himself. There was another problem. Unlimited void wouldn't survive this destructive power. And Sukuna, who had only endured the domain's effects for a brief moment, might break free sooner than expected. Gojo's mind flashed back to his previous fight with Kenjaku, to the moment Tenjin had appeared within his domain. Unlimited void functioned by flooding the enemy's mind with infinite, meaningless information until the brain simply shut down. But Tenjin had been unaffected, without even attempting to resist. There was only one explanation. Tenjin's posthumous evolution into a non-human entity had pushed their cognition beyond human limits. And Sukuna, alive for a millennium, his soul steeped in cursed energy, might possess a similar resistance. Gojo acted in an instant. The technique he had been preparing shifted into pure reversal, aimed directly at Sukuna's back. A heartbeat later, the coiled dragon shadow was gone, replaced by a fracturing sphere of blackness. Gojo used the recoil to fling himself clear of the gravitational pull, colliding with Sukuna in a straight, lightning-fast line and dragging him back into shattered reality. Sukuna's body, battered by the near-teleportation speed, crumpled under Gojo's grip. Pressing one hand to Sukuna's head, Gojo drove him into the ground. The earth caved, debris scattering in all directions, yet none of it mattered next to the void blooming nearby. As the black spherical barrier of unlimited void shattered, the space it had enclosed was replaced by a true void. The instant it appeared, the surrounding terrain began to break apart. Luckily, the others had kept their distance, wary of what might happen when Gojo's domain fell. The destructive anomaly lingered for only a fraction of a second, just long enough to leave a phantom afterimage in their eyes before it swallowed everything at its core. Yuki, back in reality, froze. She had felt that force firsthand while clashing with Maharage, an opponent with monstrous strength, absurd regeneration, and, worst of all, adaptation. Without overwhelming force from the first strike, Maharage would snowball into an unstoppable juggernaut. Her original plan had been to dismantle it piece by piece, denying Sukuna a second chance to tame it. But then that black
Devourer.
tore through the battlefield, ending the domain, and she was back in the open. Maharage, of course, didn't stop to think. Locked onto its target, it pressed the attack. The blade on its forearm lunged toward Yuki.
Origami.
From behind, Megumi Fushiguro thrust a hand upward, then clenched it. A shadow deepened under Maharage's feet before bursting into a massive dragon's head, which bit down on the Shikigami, dragged it skyward, and slammed it to the ground. On the sidelines, the onlookers feared the worst. The domain had collapsed, the black hole had manifested had Gojo and Sukuna destroyed each other. But a moment later, Kamihara Hajime appeared at the pit's edge. Gojo had escaped the void's pull and hammered Sukuna into the ground. Back in reality, he didn't let up, driving strike after strike into Sukuna's skull, each blow sinking the king of curses deeper into the earth. Hajime understood immediately. Sukuna's body was in shutdown, his mind overwhelmed by unlimited void. The only puzzle was the medium for his black hole imitation. It wasn't his body. The answer was obvious.
Heavenly calamity.
It was the only external entity close enough to serve the purpose one of the 10 Shadows Shikigami. Hajime tossed Tatsuka no Tsurugi and Anakiri to Gojo without a word. Gojo caught them, ready to deliver a killing blow, when Sukuna's vertical eye suddenly shifted. The supposedly paralyzed body moved. Sukuna's hands shot up, catching the blade mid-swing, and his other hand lashed out in a brutal punch. Gojo didn't even flinch. He knew his student was there. Hajime flickered into place, pulling Gojo clear as Sukuna's fist struck only empty air.
He hasn't broken free of infinity yet.
Gojo muttered, his 6 eyes confirming the truth. Sukuna's blank gaze was no act, but then, what was controlling him? Across the field, Megumi and Yuta battled Maharage. Yuji Itadori and Kashimo Hajime sprinted toward the center. Seeing Sukuna still standing, Yuji unleashed his technique, but nothing happened. Sukuna radiated no malice at all, like a stranger passing on the street. Impossible, Sukuna was the embodiment of malice, which meant something was deeply wrong. Yuji shouted the warning. Kashimo conjured a lightning spear and hurled it. Sukuna turned at the last moment, catching the projectile only for it to explode, searing his arms with jagged burns. The display confirmed it. Sukuna's movements were mechanical, his behavior driven by something primal and incomplete.
Orochi.
Hajime said.
If he took Orochi's body, maybe fragments of its mind remain, and they're what's moving him.
Gojo's 6 eyes couldn't see thoughts, but they confirmed one thing. Sukuna's mind was still ensnared.
I wanted to force him to use the move he pulled when Maharage nearly killed him.
Gojo said.
I think it's tied to his true technique. Next, I'll force it out and then I'll kill him.
Chapter 165, 165-166, Kashimo Hajime, 3 months ago. Chapter 166, Kashimo Hajime.
Take Mikazuchi no Kami, Calamity of the Ferocious God.
Kashimo Hajime once again unleashed Butsu Matama. This spirit-forged sword was devastatingly effective, yet even among sorcerers with inherited techniques, only a handful like Gojo Satoru could wield it repeatedly without tearing their bodies apart. For Kashimo Hajime, Butsu Matama was still an external weapon. Every release strained him, damaging his body little by little. As a hidden trump card, it would have been fine, but using it constantly pushed him dangerously close to collapse. Lightning armor crackled across Kashimo Hajime's frame, wrapping him in a divine shell of storm and fury. At that moment, he felt a strange illusion, his body dissolving into the lightning itself, transcending flesh and becoming pure, unbound energy. The sensation was mostly an illusion, but also a warning from his instincts. His body was nearing its limit. Hajime didn't care. Life was short, too short. From youth to old age, regrets always piled up. And besides, hadn't Kenjaku resurrected him in this era for one reason? To face the strongest. Now was the moment he had pursued. Even if death awaited, Hajime would step forward without hesitation. Clutching the lightning-forged Butsu Mitama, Hajime drove the blade toward Sukuna. Yuji Itadori's techniques were ineffective here, but Yuji still fought with his raw physical ability, something he had always excelled at. Sukuna, partly restrained by the incomplete binding of Mahoraga's Orochi form, responded on instinct. Though he could still use techniques, the lack of full consciousness limited him. Even so, the passive effect of Star Rage made him a walking catastrophe. The colossal blade came down and Sukuna raised a hand to meet it. Their clash didn't spray blood but erupted into a storm of lightning shards, ringing like hammer against steel. Hajime staggered under the recoil, nearly losing his grip. The single vertical eye on Sukuna's face swiveled, locking onto Hajime. With terrifying speed, Sukuna launched his first true counterattack. One punch. Kashimo Hajime blocked as best he could, but the impact shook the battlefield, lightning exploding outward in violent bursts. Hajime had fought countless powerhouses in his past life, sorcerers who embodied strength itself, humans like living Oni, capable of tearing iron with their bare hands. But none had ever made him feel the raw futility he felt now. This was no mere human-shaped monster. Sukuna was a silent mountain, immovable, crushing all who stood in his way.
Flying thunder, linked pearls.
Lightning flared from Kashimo Hajime's back, splitting into several slender bolts that launched forward like arrows. They shrieked through the air toward Sukuna, only to be caught and crushed in his four hands. The crackling fragments scattered like sparks, yet Sukuna walked through them unflinching. He smashed the ground as though it were fragile glass and closed the distance. Hajime's thunder god state flickered. Another exchange or two might end it entirely.
I'll test his condition.
Beside Gojo, Kashimo Hajime's ally stepped forward, then in an instant appeared before Sukuna. The King of Curses was hurled sideways, redirected mid-charge and slammed into the ground. Hajime's ally pinned him, pressing Sukuna's chest down with cursed energy reinforcement until the earth itself caved. Yet Sukuna ignored his injuries. His arms lashed out at impossible angles, but they struck only empty air.
It's all instinct. He's not even a beast right now.
The ally muttered.
He's more like a machine.
This was Hajime's chance. Butsu Mitama now rested sheathed at his hip, no longer blazing with lightning but appearing as an ancient, weathered blade. Hajime stood poised, eyes shut, the storm gathering silently behind him.
100% release.
The lightning armor around his body contracted, but behind him, a faint halo within the storm grew sharper, subtle but terrifying. His ally observed carefully. The resonance between Hajime's cursed energy and the divine sword was peaking. Too much more and it would overflow. Hajime's eyes remained closed as he drew. A simple horizontal cut, no theatrics. A line of lightning traced the slash, fleeting like a fish darting through water. It was so fast it seemed to vanish in an instant, yet its edge found Sukuna's body. A clean cut appeared across his waist, though his monstrous physique kept him from splitting apart immediately. That was only the beginning. Lightning spread through Sukuna's body. His eyes trembled for the first time.
Heavenly lightning induction.
Hajime's lips parted as the heavens themselves answered. From the ground to the sky, lightning erupted in a towering pillar, engulfing Sukuna in a storm so blinding the other sorcerers had to avert their eyes. The battlefield reeked of scorched air, the rumble of the storm drowning everything. And yet within that divine pillar they saw it, Sukuna's silhouette, horns rising, monstrous form revealed.
Hollow technique, purple.
Chapter 166, 167, Unlimited Void, Open Domain, 3 months ago. Chapter 167, Unlimited Void, Open Domain. No one truly understood the depths of Sukuna's technique. When he first appeared in the Heian era, his overwhelming strength and ruthless massacres earned him the title Ryomen Sukuna. His 4 eyes and 4 arms were not just physical features but symbols of fear. Back then, the distinction between sorcerer and curse user was still blurred. That age was chaotic, and those who practiced jujutsu were divided less by morality than by degrees of evil. Even in that grim world, Sukuna stood apart. Unlike others who sought power, wealth, or reputation, Sukuna had abandoned his humanity altogether. For him, morality was meaningless, as irrelevant as scolding a wolf for eating sheep. To him, all people were prey, whether ordinary civilians or trained jujutsu sorcerers. In his eyes, humanity was divided into three categories. The first, food, plain and simple. The second, sorcerers who, through skill or luck, forced him to take them seriously before slaughtering them. He had encountered cooks like Yurazu or spellcasters whose names he had long forgotten, who barely rose above the level of prey. The third, the rarest, those who could truly challenge him, forcing him to acknowledge their existence. Such individuals were so few their numbers hardly mattered. This distorted worldview made Sukuna's actions horrifying even to curse users accustomed to killing. His atrocities eventually drove every sorcerer faction to unite in war against him. And yet, despite facing armies, Sukuna emerged victorious. Alone, he cut down countless sorcerers, turning that entire age into one overshadowed by his reign of terror until his eventual sealing. His techniques were infamous: dismantle and cleave-slashing attacks that shredded through all defenses, fire arrow and attack of scorching destruction, and wielding cursed tools he could even summon lightning. Yet Sukuna never revealed the binding vows of his techniques. No one ever learned how or why he could possess multiple techniques or the full extent of his power. But perhaps such answers didn't matter. To call him a
Natural disaster.
or a
Demon god.
was not exaggeration.
Open.
This incantation was Sukuna's trigger for one of his most enigmatic abilities. Its lethality was not in overwhelming destruction, but in the first stage's effect. Modern sorcerers might describe it as
Deconstruction.
but Sukuna thought of it differently, like preparing a feast. The first stage forced everything within range into a state of vulnerability, pinned down like fish laid upon a cutting board, their bellies sliced open, left helpless for the butcher's knife. The drawback, the target required sufficient cursed energy. And the target did not even need to be alive. Abstract constructs, barriers, or techniques themselves could be caught. Once conditions were met, Open advanced into a second and final stage. While its raw damage was less than his slashes or fire arrow, its control was absolute, seizing opportunities and interrupting opponents at crucial moments. Now, surrounded, bleeding, and under relentless assault, Sukuna didn't need raw power, he needed disruption. And he possessed something no other sorcerer had: the innate ability to use two techniques simultaneously.
Domain expansion. Malevolent shrine.
4 hands wove signs, 2 mouths, one on his face, one on his abdomen, chanted in unison. A crushing weight descended, fixing everyone in place. The bloody, grotesque shrine manifested once more, drowning the battlefield in slaughter.
It's that unknown ability.
Gojo Satoru grimaced as cursed energy drained unnaturally from his body. A soul-deep tremor echoed inside him, and his 6 eyes revealed something far worse. His technique itself felt.
This isn't just suppression.
He realized. The effect was subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but irreversible. If left unchecked, it could permanently erode a sorcerer's inherited technique. Gojo connected the dots: Sukuna's abnormalities, his history, the way he fought. The truth was dawning on him. Before Sukuna could fully unleash his shrine's slashes, he faltered. Black liquid dripped from his mouth and nose, his body racked by some unseen backlash. Malevolent shrine wavered, unstable. The shackles binding Gojo and the others weakened immediately. Kamihara Hajime readied his cursed technique, but before he could act, Gojo formed a hand sign. Hajime stepped back, preparing to strike if the situation demanded it.
Domain expansion. Unlimited void.
Gojo's domain erupted, but something was different. This time, Hajime and the others did not experience the suffocating.
Infinity.
No boundary barrier appeared. Instead, the bloody sky of malevolent shrine shifted, transforming into a breathtaking, star-filled cosmos. The clash of 2 open domains had begun. Sukuna's slashes rained down, forcing everyone to defend themselves, yet even he paused to observe Gojo's new attempt. Chapter 168, Limitless. The night sky blazed brilliantly, filled with countless stars scattered across an endless abyss. Yet this wasn't a real star chart. It looked more like a divine painting, something unreal and impossible, now replacing parts of Sukuna's domain. This shimmering sight was the result of a single spark-the eruption from the clash of two domains. Gojo Satoru had already attempted one open-ended domain expansion, but when it failed, he seized the fleeting moment with perfection. Destroying part of his brain and repairing it with reverse cursed technique, he escaped burnout and re-expanded his domain. This time, his unlimited void stood strong against Sukuna's malevolent shrine.
Gojo Satoru,
Sukuna's lips curled into an arrogant grin.
you might truly possess that potential, even your students carry it, to face such a battle in this era.
His gaze sharpened as he sneered.
Those eyes.
Invisible slashes laced the air, weaving a merciless net. The starlight fractured, shattering into sharp, fragmented mirrors. For a moment, it looked as though the entire world itself had broken. But in this broken reflection, everyone could clearly see Sukuna's slashes, and yet,
Unlimited void.
thought Kamihara Hajime, watching the scene unfold. He had expected Gojo's domain to trap them or Sukuna's slashes to cut everything apart, but neither had happened. The only explanation was that Gojo's closed unlimited void had transformed.
The current unlimited void
Gojo said calmly,
no longer guarantees a sure-hit effect. Instead, it expands into true limitless, a space without end.
With both hands stretched wide, Gojo manipulated the scene. Instantly, everything seemed to shift. Distances warped. Sukuna suddenly found himself farther from Gojo, Hajime, and the others, though no movement had actually taken place. Even the shrine within his own domain receded. Space itself had expanded.
Space.
Hajime realized, his chest tightening. Yes, this was Gojo's technique taken to its extreme. Limitless now encompassed the entire domain. Distances stretched endlessly, making escape impossible. Sukuna tested it, stepping forward. But no matter how much strength he exerted, his steps felt pathetically small, as though he were treading water. Objectively, he was moving, but the domain itself made it meaningless.
Unceasing change.
Sukuna thought, recognizing the control.
He's twisting space itself at will, before this domain clash is decided.
As though to prove it, Gojo condensed cursed energy at his fingertips. A blazing purple light swelled instantly hollow purple. It tore forward, growing to the size of a house mid-flight, warping space as it surged toward Sukuna. Sukuna attempted to move again, but the warped distance rendered it useless. Escape was futile, so he did the only thing possible. He prepared to counter.
The stretch of space.
Sukuna thought coldly.
Not creation, not illusion. A reality I can't neutralize easily.
With a sweep of his arm, invisible slashes erupted around him, followed by the formation of a burning, arrow-shaped mass of cursed energy, his fire arrow. The two devastating attacks met. Hollow purple clashed against Sukuna's barrage, its raw, destructive nature unbothered by his slashes. But when the fire arrow struck, it ignited violently, wrapping hollow purple in crimson flame. The collision exploded, shaking the domain with a thunderous impact. When the smoke parted, Sukuna's massive frame strode forward, unharmed, his cursed technique already forming again.
If I can't lock on,
Sukuna thought.
then I'll cover everything.
His intent was clear, fill the domain with slashes no matter the cost. But before he could unleash it, a figure appeared before him. Gojo had closed the distance in an instant. Sukuna's instincts reacted. Slashes tore downward but none struck true. His fists thrust forward but they never landed. Gojo's punch, however, connected. Sukuna's realization came in a flash. Gojo wasn't applying limitless universally. He was controlling it locally, stretching only Sukuna's attack distance while shortening his own. Precision beyond belief. The battle shifted to close quarters. Gojo endured Sukuna's stray slashes, instantly repairing wounds with reverse cursed technique. Sukuna, however, took blow after blow, his immense strength barely able to keep pace with Gojo's relentless assaults. One of his arms shattered under another point-blank hollow purple. His body began its rapid repair, but for the first time, he struggled to keep up. And still Sukuna grinned.
How long can you keep this up, Gojo Satoru? How long before your precision collapses?
Gojo's eyes glinted with quiet defiance.
I don't need to last forever. You'll break before I do.
Chapter 168, 169, Don't Worry, I'm the Strongest. 3 months ago. Chapter Don't Worry, I'm the Strongest. Unable to resist, Sukuna realized the balance was slipping. As Gojo Satoru had declared, if this continued, Sukuna would be the first to collapse. Gojo's infinity, constantly shifting and near impenetrable, was almost impossible to overcome, and every attempt to counter it had only ended in futility. Close-range combat made matters even worse for Sukuna. Any attack potent enough to activate a cursed technique was instantly perceived by Gojo's 6 eyes, and once noticed, it was inevitably smothered by infinity. This furious exchange happened in only a matter of moments. By the time both men's domains clashed, their barriers shattered simultaneously, dispersing the anomalies and revealing the raw world around them. Gojo's makeshift domain was still incomplete. Logically, it should have lost out in a head-on collision, but domains are shaped not only by structure, but by the sorcerer's condition. Gojo's earlier damage to Sukuna had tipped the scales just enough, dragging the fight into a draw. The moment the domains fell apart, Sukuna's eyes gleamed. This was the opening he had been waiting for. Both men were suffering from technique burnout, but unlike Gojo, who needed to harm himself and use reverse cursed technique to reboot his abilities, Sukuna had another path. His signature cleave and dismantle were temporarily on cooldown, but his body carried certain special properties that allowed him to call on other techniques. This moment was his chance to seize the flow of battle. Far away, Sukuna's attention flickered toward another terrifying clash, the duel of two Mahoraga. Never in history had two 10 Shadows users summoned Mahoraga at the same time. No one knew what would happen when the most adaptive Shikigami fought itself. The result was a nightmare loop. Each Mahoraga constantly evolved to counter the other stronger attacks, tougher defenses, sharper speed only for the opponent to adapt in turn. Like a spiral staircase with no end, they climbed higher and higher, endlessly evolving. Megumi Fushiguro and Yuta Akatsu soon realized their role in the fight was slipping away. The battle had reached such heights that their interference only made things worse. Mahoraga no longer obeyed them like tools but fought on raw instinct, with reaction speed and foresight that bordered on cheating. Earlier, both Megumi and Yuta had tried to intervene, aiming to crush the opposing Mahoraga before things spiraled out of control. But they were instantly swatted aside, their intentions read before they could act. Speed, power, and adaptation allowed Mahoraga to perfectly counter every attempt, turning their desperate strike into humiliation. If Megumi had not been able to control his Mahoraga, they might already be dead. Yet even that control was hanging by a thread. At this stage, the Shikigami were practically fighting each other on instinct alone, their combat perceptions so high that skill no longer mattered. To Yuta and Megumi, their speed looked like teleportation. Their durability rivaled Yuki Tsukumo's mass-based technique. Even with Rika unleashed, Yuta wasn't sure he could kill them in one strike, and if he failed, the Mahoraga would only evolve further. The only silver lining was that the two Shikigami had adapted exclusively to each other. They hadn't yet adjusted to the abilities of Gojo, Hajime, or the others. If there was a time to end them, it was now. But that window was closing fast. Meanwhile, the sorcerers who had been pulled back to reality from Unlimited Void and Malevolent Shrine noticed the chaos. The destruction was so vast that ignoring it was impossible, yet they couldn't intervene. Sukuna was already making his move.
Open fire arrow.
It wasn't a conventional projectile. This version of Sukuna's fire arrow ignited directly on the enemy's body, bypassing distance entirely. Its only drawback was the time it took to lock onto the target, but now, with their domains shattered, that drawback hardly mattered. Blood-red flames erupted across Gojo's body, burning ominously. The seamless nature of the attack made it difficult for Gojo to recover from his burnout. Using his self-harming restart method here would have been suicidal, as the flames would devour him mid-process. Sukuna knew this wouldn't kill Gojo. Hajime was standing nearby, and his cursed technique could easily extinguish the flames if needed. The moment the fire arrow ignited, Sukuna had already stopped caring about the result. Instead, he closed all four of his eyes and drew upon his endless abyss of cursed energy. His reverse cursed technique surged into overdrive, repairing his battered body. Forcibly, he summoned the 10 Shadows round deer, accelerating his recovery even further. By the time he opened his eyes again, Sukuna was nearly back to his peak. Across the battlefield, Gojo had indeed erased the flames, their gazes locked and battle lust rekindled in both pairs of eyes.
Hajime, deal with the others.
Gojo said calmly.
My domain still isn't complete, and the aftermath could annihilate anyone nearby. This fight needs to stay one-on-one.
Hajime had just dispelled the fire arrow for him. He gave a short nod, trusting Gojo completely, then retreated without protest. Distance meant nothing. If Gojo needed him, Hajime would return in an instant.
Gojo-sensei,
Yuji Itadori said, clenching his fists.
you have to win, this guy.
Gojo cut him off with a reassuring pat on the shoulder. A familiar grin stretched across his face.
No problem, I'm the strongest. That last resort is just a backup plan. Itadori, you're no longer Sukuna's vessel. You've awakened your technique and your path's only beginning.
Yuji froze for a heartbeat, then nodded firmly and followed Megumi, Yuta, and the others as they retreated. The battlefield quieted. Neither Gojo nor Sukuna rushed forward. Instead, they spoke like old rivals.
What you want
Gojo said,
is a pure fight, isn't it? No interruptions, just us, this time.
For the first time in centuries, Sukuna felt alive. From gluttonous satisfaction in the Heian era to the boredom of reincarnation, he had long since lost excitement in battle. But now facing Gojo, imagining the bloodshed to come, and even envisioning his own death, he felt true exhilaration. If he killed Gojo, the era of curses would flourish. If he was slain, it would mark the end of his reign and the triumph of humanity. Both outcomes thrilled him equally. Sukuna was pure chaos given flesh. He wasn't interested in luxury or control like Kenjaku. He craved stimulation, an opponent that could genuinely threaten him. Even the possibility of death was something he welcomed with open arms.
Come
He snarled, a grin splitting his face.
and satisfy me. Domain expansion, malevolent shrine. Domain expansion, unlimited void.
Reality warped again as both domains unfolded at once, colliding visions twisting the world. Still, their movements didn't slow.
Your domain isn't perfected.
Sukuna observed.
The essence of a domain is the complete application of a technique within a closed reality. And yours has only scratched the surface.
Gojo chuckled.
As expected of the King of Curses, my technique is special. You're right, it isn't easy to master, but you've given me a lot of inspiration. Consider it my thanks. Now I'll let you experience it firsthand.
Sukuna's smile deepened. He clapped his hands together and suddenly his body erupted in crimson flames. To Gojo's surprise, they weren't illusory. The fire burned Sukuna himself, injuring him deliberately.
What?
Before Gojo could finish the thought, Sukuna's voice cut him off.
Domain expansion.
Lotus-like flames bloomed from the void, covering the domain in a sea of red.
Karma flame.
Chapter 169, 170, A New Domain, 3 months ago. Chapter A New Domain. It is well known among sorcerers that a domain expansion is essentially a fusion of one's innate technique and a barrier technique. The emphasis may vary for each caster, but the connection to their innate ability is undeniable. This raised a question Gojo Satoru had long considered. If someone possessed multiple techniques, could they manifest multiple domains? He had always thought it nearly impossible. Kenjaku was the perfect example. The ancient curse user carried countless techniques stolen through his twisted experiments, yet his domain only reflected one, his foundational technique. Even when he was forced to the brink of death by Gojo, he never revealed a second domain. Gojo's conclusion was that stolen or acquired techniques lacked the same resonance as an inherited technique, which was why Kenjaku could never produce more than one domain expansion. But Sukuna was different. The King of Curses proved that multiple domains were indeed possible, and now he unveiled a terrifying new form, the Karma Flame. Red lotuses of cursed fire bloomed inside his malevolent shrine. With two hands forming seals while his other two rested calmly at his sides, Sukuna stood with eyes lowered. His body burned in blood-red flames, yet he showed no sign of pain. The sight was grotesque yet strangely sacred, like a Buddha descending willingly into hell. Flames spread like wildfire. Red lotuses sprouted rootlessly across the surface of the domain, igniting into a sea of crimson. In an instant, they consumed everything in sight, staining the shrine in fiery light. Gojo Satoru, standing within it, immediately realized the threat. Though no visible flames clung to him, he could feel the erosion gnawing at his body. His 6 eyes confirmed it. Every inch of space was saturated with Sukuna's cursed fire. This was no ordinary sure-hit effect. The karma flame had become omnipresent, thicker, and more suffocating than Sukuna's cleaving slashes. Gojo reacted instantly. He segmented his infinity, dividing the space around him into countless layers to slow the corrosion. The effort worked, but he couldn't maintain it indefinitely. The karma flame consumed cursed energy as fuel, and now, fueled by 2 overlapping domains, it spread at a terrifying rate. The only result it sought was to drag everything inside into hellfire. Gojo had to maintain the segmented infinity just to carve out a pure land for himself to stand on, but doing so weighed heavily on him. Unless he abandoned offense entirely, the fight would grow more desperate with every passing second. Sukuna, cloaked in flames that leapt and danced around him, looked almost untouchable. His expression remained calm, his body wreathed in ribbons of fire.
To call it a domain alone isn't accurate,
Sukuna said, his voice filled with manic fervor.
This is my other technique layered atop Malevolent Shrine, a first attempt at combining them.
His 4 eyes narrowed, glimmering with madness.
Karma flame burns away all sin, but tell me, Gojo Satoru.
The blood flames flared violently, distorting his body as his aura turned even more oppressive. Gojo felt the heat seep through infinity, a phantom burn that made his skin prickle despite his defenses.
True karma flame,
Sukuna said with a twisted grin.
Burns from the heart, fed by the purest sins. Look at this world of red lotuses, Gojo Satoru. The stage is already aflame. Let us fight until nothing remains.
His laughter echoed as a red lotus, unlike the countless illusions, emerged from the ground beneath them. It swelled instantly into the size of a house. This was no simple manifestation of cursed fire. It was a fused attack, karma flame entwined with his devastating slashes. Gojo's eyes sharpened. In a blink, he pulled himself backward with the pulling force of blue, dodging as the monstrous lotus bloomed. The destructive force behind it confirmed his suspicion.
this fusion.
Gojo thought.
The karma flame burns him just as much. But if it harms him more severely, that may be his weakness.
Indeed, Sukuna's scales had already melted away. His skin cracked and warped, almost unrecognizable. Yet his 4 eyes still gleamed and his body radiated raw ferocity. He no longer resembled a god or Buddha. He looked more like an Asura, a war demon drowned in his own flames. Though Sukuna was suffering, the fused domains created another problem. When 2 sorcerers clash with domains, the battle is determined by whose rules reject the other. But Sukuna's 2 techniques overlapped unnaturally well, pressing against unlimited void with overwhelming force. This restored the balance between them. Sukuna burned more severely, but Gojo's domain strained under greater pressure. Both were now on the edge. As Sukuna himself declared, the stage was set both sides could unleash their full power, and the only outcome was mutual destruction. But Sukuna had no intention of retreating. Even if karma flame consumed him, limiting infinity gave him a path to victory. All that mattered was which of them collapsed first. And so, the 3rd round of their clash began.
Eightfold, karma flame red lotus.
Sukuna roared. Red lotuses, solidified to the extreme, burst forth again. This fusion of flame and slash was far beyond anything Gojo had seen, a cursed fire capable of devouring all.
Infinity,
Gojo intoned. He raised his hand, and infinity swelled outward, halting the blooming lotuses inches away. The crimson firelight reflected against his azure 6 eyes. Then his fingers aligned. A brilliant crimson glow erupted, a stream of light trailing from his fingertips. Blue, red.
Good.
Sukuna laughed, blood and flame spilling from his twisted grin.
Let us tear each other apart until nothing remains.
The battle devolved into pure carnage. Slashes, flames, infinity, black flash, everything clashed at once. Their bodies were torn apart and instantly repaired with reverse cursed technique, burning cursed energy at an impossible rate.
Almost time.
Sukuna muttered, snapping his broken arm back into place. Half his face had been destroyed by a hollow purple, while Gojo's own body was scarred by the unseen burning of karma flame. A wicked smile spread across his half-regenerated mouth. His forearms, drenched in cursed fire, formed seals once more.
Compound domain.
Chapter 170, 171, Believe in Gojo, 3 months ago. Chapter Believe in Gojo.
Tusk, what a sight.
Someone muttered. The battlefield trembled as the fight reached a crescendo. Everyone who had just witnessed the clash against the Mahoraga summoned by Sukuna could only stare in awe at the overwhelming spectacle. But to be precise, it was Kamihara Hajime alone who had felled the Mahoraga. The twin Shikigami had evolved to absurd extremes, shrugging off cursed energy and even physical attacks. With each adaptation, their resilience grew closer to something terrifying, an approximation of true immortality. Their regeneration bordered on the impossible. Gashes inflicted by their own blades closed before the weapons had even left their flesh, making their combat resemble the illusion of a fight that could never end. Yet Hajime saw the truth. In adapting endlessly, they had also developed methods to break techniques, pierce defenses, and even hinder regeneration. That left only one way to truly end them: absolute certain kill techniques, concepts that ignored recovery altogether. Would Mahoraga eventually evolve even to counter that? Hajime did not intend to find out. By this stage, their resistance to cursed energy had grown so extreme that even the first strike from a fresh technique barely registered. Fushiguro Megumi had proven this himself. He had tried to strike them with the lightning and water Shikigami of the Ten Shadows. Even at full strength, his attacks left only minor hindrances, wounds disappearing before his eyes. The idea of finishing them with heavenly calamity had been abandoned. Against Mahoraga, conventional techniques simply weren't enough. The original plan had been for Yuta Akatsu to restrain the creature while Megumi summoned the calamity's full charge. But before that plan could be set in motion, Hajime had stepped forward. He assessed the evolved Mahoraga with a single glance, then immediately unfurled his domain. Returning to nothingness. It flashed for only an instant. The Mahoraga never adapted. Its existence ended, vanishing without resistance. Silence fell. Hajime's decisive strike drew everyone's attention back to the other side of the battlefield, where an even stranger phenomenon was unfolding. The domain where Gojo Satoru and Sukuna clashed was already filled with raging crimson karma flames, but now those flames swelled, spreading like a lotus blooming in fire.
Can Gojo-san really kill Sukuna this time?
Someone whispered, fear seeping into their voice. The fiery glow swallowed their vision. Sukuna's power felt overwhelming, godlike.
Believe in Gojo Satoru.
Hajime said calmly, his gaze never wavered from the crimson blaze. If Gojo succeeded, the nightmare might finally have an end in sight, but if he failed...
Technique reversal.
The wave consumed everything. Sukuna felt his body contract, as if his very cells had minds of their own, collapsing toward one another under impossible attraction. This was no mere gravity, it was reality collapsing inward. Then silence. The stars of unlimited void burned brilliantly, revealing a canvas of infinite night. For a moment, it looked as though Sukuna had been erased completely. But then crimson flared. A lotus of burning light opened in the starry sky, and standing within it was Sukuna. He emerged untouched, his expression calm, almost divine. The karma flames had compacted his domain into a lotus-shaped barrier, a defense potent enough to withstand even Gojo's strongest strike.
The fusion of domains, compressed into one.
Gojo muttered, unshaken. If Sukuna could survive even that, it only proved what everyone already knew. He truly was the strongest from 1,000 years ago. Sukuna spread his forearms, completing a seal as his stomach mouth chanted ominously.
Karma flame body tribulation.
From beneath Gojo's feet, another red lotus bloomed without warning. The burning intensified, gnawing at both body and soul. Sukuna himself was not spared. The karma flames devoured his own form in exchange for power. The battlefield was nothing but ruin now, reduced to ash and chaos. Gojo smiled.
What do you think I'll choose, Sukuna?
His lips curled, unrestrained, even as the searing flames tore at him. Raising his hand once more, crimson light flickered inside his azure eyes, brighter and fiercer than the surrounding inferno.
Technique reversal.
Chapter 171, 172, Gojo 1, 3 months ago. Chapter Gojo 1. A sudden surge of crimson light consumed the battlefield, blotting out everything inside the domain. From the outside, Gojo, Satoru, and Sukuna both seemed to vanish, leaving only a giant burning red void. The swirling radiance filled the entirety of the space. When limitless divergent force pressed upon it, the destructive effect far surpassed that of blue. If blue was the infinite attraction that collapsed all structures inward, then red was its opposite decomposition. Anything struck by cursed technique reversal, red would disintegrate into its most fundamental components. The result, however, always depended on the opponent's resistance. A weak spirit would dissolve instantly. Against Sukuna, red demanded far more. This battle was different from the countless ones Gojo had fought before. Unlimited Void, with its ability to drown intruders in endless streams of information, was overwhelming enough on its own. But Gojo's 6 eyes allowed him to draw out his technique's full potential even without a domain. That was why most battles ended quickly. Opponents would freeze the moment Unlimited Void expanded, leaving him to finish them without difficulty. Now, though, was different. This was no ordinary fight. Gojo was forced into a life-or-death struggle. Not since his youth against that one man had he been pushed this far. That battle had awakened his mastery of reverse cursed technique, red, and ultimately the hollow technique, purple. And now, another evolution loomed. His new domain structure sparked a revelation. What if he maximized limitless under domain amplification? If he could perfect that synergy, he could surpass even the concept of
Extreme technique.
blue had already been resisted. Sukuna, wrapped within his compressed karma red lotus, had become something so condensed that blue's destructive collapse could barely damage him. Red would be the decisive blow. Laughter rang out from within Sukuna's flames. Crimson and red clashed, intertwining in a violent storm. Sukuna abandoned defense entirely, dragging Gojo's strike deeper into his own flames, even at the cost of tearing his body apart. His dual domains burned at their absolute limit, determined to reduce everything to nothingness. The collision lasted only moments, but each heartbeat thundered like an eternity. The annihilation storm stayed confined to the domain, though flashes leaking through let the onlookers grasp its scale.
Gojo-sensei won.
Kamihara Hajime, watching with steady eyes, gave his verdict. Unlimited Void still stood firm. With a clash this destructive, it was impossible for both fighters to remain intact. The survival of Gojo's domain spoke the outcome. The crimson blaze receded, replaced by ribbons of fading afterglow spiraling around Gojo Satoru. He lifted his gaze, 6 eyes sharp as ever, toward the broken figure before him. Sukuna. His dual domains lay in ruins. The red lotus was shattered, malevolent shrine obliterated. His body was grotesquely damaged, his torso gone, only a single arm intact, and much of his head missing, one eye glaring stubbornly from the wreckage of his form. Any other sorcerer would have perished instantly. But Sukuna, neither fully human nor curse, survived on sheer defiance of death itself. If left alone, his monstrous vitality might allow him to return once more. Gojo would not allow it.
It's over.
His words cut through the silence. Sukuna, however, only smiled with his remaining mouth. His broken form dissolved, his ruined domain fading as shadows coiled at his feet.
So exhilarating.
He rasped. From the darkness rose heavenly calamity, merging into his mangled body. Space twisted violently as his form convulsed.
Consider it.
With that, his body collapsed inward, consumed by distortion until nothing remained but a singularity. Star Rage. Even in defeat, Sukuna's counterattack was catastrophic. Fusing heavenly calamity into his body, he had created something akin to a Jujutsu black hole. Though it would not expand infinitely to end the world, its destructive imprint on the land would last forever. Gojo, however, did not flinch. He had anticipated this. When the distortion began, he already knew Sukuna's intention. It could not be stopped by force once initiated. Approaching recklessly would only mean being devoured. There was only one answer: annihilation from a distance. Gojo clasped his hands. Azure and crimson sparks flared around him, weaving together until the void of unlimited void was painted in two colors.
Limitless purple.
Blue and red intertwined like pigments poured together, merging into a luminous violet. Positive and negative infinities collided endlessly, birthing an overwhelming destructive force. The domain, flooded with blinding light, spun only for an instant before the fusion completed. Gojo's 6 eyes, reflecting the storm, now burned with the brilliance of pure amethyst.
Sorry, Sukuna, you won't succeed.
Before the words even finished leaving his lips, Purple detonated. Faster than Sukuna's collapse could complete, Purple's annihilation swallowed everything. The black mass of star rage endured only a few breaths before its structure unraveled, erased without mercy. When the light faded, unlimited void held only Gojo Satoru, standing alone. He released the domain, stepping back into reality, yet there was no relief on his face. He knew this was not the end. The 4th round was about to begin. And this time, Sukuna would return wielding Limitless itself.
Hajime.
Kamihara Hajime, who had been the steady observer, nodded. His role as support had carried the others this far, but against Sukuna now, only direct intervention would matter.
Judging by his revival, Sukuna can indeed replicate and reverse acquired techniques.
Hajime thought aloud.
But speed is his weakness. He managed to use Star Rage quickly because its reversal is simple. 10 Shadows, though, slowed him down. The fusion with Mahoraga and Heavenly Calamity required time. That delay.
Yudor Akatsu approached silent, but his eyes conveyed his intent. Hajime understood immediately. And then it happened. Light spilled across the battlefield where Sukuna had fallen. At first, it was like sunlight piercing through, then it grew blinding until motes of radiance drifted down like ash. From within that brilliance, a figure emerged.
Long time no see.
The malicious smile was unmistakable. Sukuna stood whole once more, stronger than ever, his aura heavier, his presence divine. The two locked eyes, neither rushing forward. Sukuna lifted one hand, a faint azure glow flickering at his fingertip.
Limitless.
He murmured. The words dripped with amusement. This technique demanded extraordinary control over cursed energy, something even most born into the Gojo family could never achieve without 6 eyes. But Sukuna, who had stolen and mastered countless abilities, now wielded it as his own. His monstrous control had forged Limitless into his arsenal. Gone was his previous scaly appearance. He had returned closer to his original form, regal and terrifying. He spread his 4 arms wide, Limitless unfurling around him. His voice carried arrogance and certainty, echoing like a divine decree.
Everyone, let us begin our slaughter once more.
Chapter 172, 173, 10 Shadows Technique, 3 months ago. Chapter 10 Shadows Technique. The violent collision that came head-on was almost too fast for anyone to react. Sukuna, pulled forward by his newly acquired technique, performed a spatial leap. By the time everyone realized what had happened and tried to counterattack, it was already too late. But Kamihara Hajime was an exception. He saw Sukuna appear in midair, reaching toward Megumi Fushiguro in an attempt to strike. From Hajime's perspective, the scene unfolded in slow motion. In sudden, life-or-death situations like this, Hajime's instincts sharpened. His awareness would intertwine with the rhythm of time itself, slowing everything around him. Within that stillness, he could observe details others would miss and decide with precision. Sukuna's spatial leap wasn't about speed. It wasn't a physical burst but a manipulation of space itself, achieved through his use of blue. Its strength lay in its suddenness, not raw velocity. Hajime recognized his intent instantly. Without even activating a technique, he intercepted Sukuna's strike head-on. The clash erupted with a thunderous impact that shook the battlefield. For a brief moment, Hajime held him back. But Sukuna's 4 arms made his assault overwhelming. The next barrage forced Hajime on the defensive. He barely managed to block before Sukuna's strikes broke through, sending him flying backward. A sharp crack echoed. Hajime's right arm nearly shattered into blood and fragments. During teleportation, Sukuna couldn't attach heavy force behind his strikes, but once he landed, he unleashed his full might. The brutal blow nearly pulverized Hajime's blocking arm. Yet the injury vanished instantly. Hajime stood firm as Sukuna abandoned his pursuit of Megumi and pressed the offensive against him instead.
Heavenly calamity.
Megumi's shadow surged violently. From it erupted a massive dragon-like shikigami, its serpentine body winding upward as its jaws opened wide. A torrent of lightning, wrapped in storm winds, roared toward Sukuna. Sukuna only glanced at the beast with one eye before casually raising his hand.
Dismantle.
The invisible slash tore forward as Heavenly Calamity's breath engulfed him. The dragon didn't relent, it spiraled higher into the sky, preparing another charge. Sukuna's slash carved across Hajime. Dodging was impossible, yet Hajime refused to waste a technique on a mere probe. A streak of blood appeared before vanishing instantly, erased as quickly as it came. From within the lightning storm, Sukuna's figure re-emerged, completely unharmed.
Limitless.
The familiar defense spread across him. None were surprised, though all were troubled. Limitless left no blind spots and could only be pierced by special conditions, such as domain amplification. But that came at the cost of domain expansion, leaving them at an even greater disadvantage against Sukuna. Hajime could have stopped Limitless entirely by using time stop, freezing Sukuna's techniques, but it was still only the 4th round of the King of Curses arsenal. Handing him all his techniques this early would be reckless, a short-sighted solution. As Sukuna tested his opponents, Megumi directed Heavenly Calamity into a dive from above. Sukuna smiled at the familiar sight. He didn't underestimate the impact, but pure force meant nothing against Limitless. This time, though, Sukuna didn't simply endure. He raised his upper arms and wove a seamless web of slashes into the air. The dragon descended with unstoppable momentum, colliding with the lattice of cuts. For several breaths it held, its long charge empowering it. Then, with a thunderous roar, it tore through Sukuna's heavenly net. Damaged but unyielding, Heavenly Calamity lunged forward, only to be met by another dragon's head, grotesque yet eerily similar. The two beasts crashed together, their massive bodies coiling in the air. At that moment, Yuji Itadori and the others closed in. They surrounded Sukuna from every side, forcing him to divide his attention. Without a domain, even his slashes required precise targeting, limiting his range. Kashimo Hajime loosed a lightning strike, which Sukuna shattered with a punch. But then a sharp pain spread across his neck and chest. 2 gashes carved diagonally through his flesh, regenerating rapidly but unmistakable in their origin. Sukuna's many eyes turned toward Yuji.
His slash.
Itadori's technique, evil extermination, manifested not as an invisible cut but as a judgment. If the target bore malice toward him, the slash formed directly on their body. The damage depended on their physical resilience. Limitless, designed to repel external force, couldn't defend against this internal judgment.
Interesting.
Sukuna grinned. Yuji froze as 4 eyes locked onto him. A chill pierced his spine as Sukuna pulled him forward with blue. But before the pull could complete, a hand pressed on his shoulder, canceling the force. Gojo Satoru stood behind him, neutralizing Sukuna's technique. The original master of Limitless had arrived. If Yuji's ability could bypass Sukuna's defense, his role was crucial. Yuta Akatsu and the others launched attacks, buying Yuji space. Fueled by his success, Yuji invoked his technique again. While not enough to kill Sukuna, it disrupted his untouchable defense. Another counter remained Megumi's Mahoraga. The Shikigami could adapt even to Limitless, eventually evolving to strike through space itself, but Sukuna knew its capabilities. Without full adaptation, Mahoraga risked instant annihilation. Megumi recalled the Shikigami beside Gojo. A plan formed instantly.
Hajime.
At his call, Gojo understood. They intended to let Mahoraga adapt not to Sukuna's Limitless but to his own. But Sukuna anticipated their plan, his fingers locked together.
Domain expansion malevolent shrine.
The world warped into a mountain of corpses and rivers of blood. But this time, the shrine stretched even further, swallowing everything within sight.
Limitless.
He layered the technique across his domain, splitting space into untouchable barriers. Everyone froze, proof of the altered battlefield. Then, his hidden hands formed another seal.
Burub Ura.
Chapter 173, 174, 4th round, 3 months ago. Chapter 174, 4th round. By the 4th round, it was time to unleash everything. Yuta Akatsu immediately activated his domain expansion and released Rika. Even though it was still a closed domain, he had no choice but to push forward with all he had. Gojo Satoru worked alongside Megumi Fushiguro, trying to help Mahoraga adapt to Limitless. It wasn't guaranteed to succeed, but even a brief attempt might create an opening good news for Yuta. The biggest threat, however, was Sukuna. He had already tamed Mahoraga, and the familiar Dharma wheel spun ominously above his head. By hiding Mahoraga in his shadow, Sukuna linked himself with the Shikigami, redirecting his own injuries into Mahoraga's adaptive ability.
Stay sharp.
Kamihara Hajime said, his tone steady and cold.
I'll avoid attacking Sukuna directly for now. I'll focus on breaking his domain first. But we can only hold out for another incense stick's worth of time at most, if we still can't find a way through his defenses.
Yuta understood. Sukuna was already an overwhelming opponent on his own, but with Mahoraga's adaptation, this was not a battle they could afford to drag out. If Gojo's plan failed and no opening was created, Hajime would be forced to use his forbidden technique time stop to finish Sukuna off. But Hajime was reluctant. Techniques that decisive needed to be saved for the very end. If he exhausted it now, what would they rely on against Sukuna's true final form?
All phases pervade purity.
With Rika's full support, Yuta pushed his domain to its absolute limit. His body cracked under the strain, tiny blood vessels ruptured, blood welled around his eyes, and streams poured from his nose and mouth. But he succeeded. From the void emerged another Sukuna, a perfect mirror of his appearance except for his lifeless eyes, devoid of that overwhelming malice. The copy, however, wasn't flawless. Yuta's domain couldn't perfectly replicate Sukuna's instincts, combat experience, or rhythm. It was nothing more than a puppet, not a true equal. If it were otherwise, such a jujutsu would be absurd. Sukuna chuckled at the sight.
A pitiful imitation. Do you mean to entertain me with this?
He clapped his hands together, conjuring another flaming arrow. The arrow burst apart mid-flight, transforming into a roaring torrent of crimson fire that swept forward. The false Sukuna was engulfed instantly, and reality around it twisted from the sheer density of slashes hidden within the flames. Before the mirrored puppet could even move, Sukuna's cheek split open from a slash. Yuji Itadori and Kashimo Hajime had struck from behind. Sukuna sneered, raising his hand to unleash, dismantle, and cleave across Kashimo's entire area. At the same time, crimson light gathered in his other pair of hands preparing.
Red!
But before he could release it, his body suddenly jerked and twisted midair, breaking his stance. The orb of red dissipated uselessly. Hajime had seized the moment, activating his technique.
Time rain!
The battlefield darkened as rootless rain began to fall from nowhere, blanketing an area far wider than before. The droplets shimmered unnaturally, each one a part of his domain's shifting composition. Sukuna staggered slightly, then smirked as his wound healed. He hadn't even regained full footing before launching another ultimate-level cleave. The invisible slash tore through Hajime's body, but the cut vanished like an illusion. The curtain of rain distorted the strike, leaving Sukuna unfazed but watchful.
You're building an open domain.
Sukuna muttered, his tone certain. He was right. The shifting rain curtain was Hajime's attempt to merge his technique with the barrier of reality itself. Unlike a closed domain, which carved out a space from the world, an open domain rewrote the battlefield directly on reality. But Hajime wasn't foolish enough to expect Sukuna to wait patiently while he experimented. In ancient times, open domains were born out of necessity. When battles between multiple sorcerers and curses became chaotic, closed domains were vulnerable. With more opponents, an enemy could simply shatter the barrier from outside. A genius had solved this flaw by removing the boundary altogether, creating the open domain arena where no outside interference could break the effect. Over the centuries, closed domains became dominant again, easier to master and perfect for one-on-one killing blows. But if Hajime could complete his open domain here and now, even Sukuna's overwhelming power would face direct suppression. Sukuna's eyes gleamed. He knew the risk. Against Hajime's fleeting yet destructive domain expansion, losing the structural advantage of a closed domain would mean certain defeat. So Sukuna pressed harder, but Hajime refused to attack recklessly, wary of Mahoraga adapting to his technique. Instead, he maintained his defense, letting the rain distort Sukuna's assaults while Yuta's mirrored Sukuna kept him occupied. Meanwhile, Kashimo surged like a thunderbolt, his lightning-wrapped form tearing at Sukuna's defenses, while Yuji pressed forward, his unique technique bypassing Limitless. For the first time, Yuji pushed his cursed energy to the limit, feeling the raw weight of his potential.
What's he waiting for?
Hajime thought, scanning Sukuna's movements. The king of curses exchanged blows, even took damage but refused to end it.
Is it Mahoraga? No.
Despite appearing surrounded, Hajime knew it was his side that was in danger. Sukuna's arsenal dismantle, cleave, fire arrow, blue, red, and star rage was lethal at every range. Then the worst happened. Yuta's domain cracked, torn apart from the outside. Slashes filled the battlefield like a storm, endless and merciless. Yuji stepped forward, ready to risk everything with his own domain, but a familiar figure suddenly appeared before them.
Gojo-sensei.
Gojo Satoru had returned, his smile brimming with confidence.
I'll take it from here. Domain expansion unlimited void.
As the infinite expanse bloomed, Sukuna's expression sharpened, his fighting spirit burning brighter. Crimson light pulsed from his hands as he prepared his counter.
What's this? Have your little schemes finally come together?
Sukuna sneered. Gojo dodged each precise slash with ease, his 6 eyes tracking every fluctuation in space. His smile never faltered.
You'll see soon enough.
Chapter 174, 175, Copy Technique, 3 months ago. Chapter 175, Copy Technique. Gojo Satoru divided space with Limitless, yet Mahoraga, having adapted, tore through the spatial restriction and abruptly appeared behind him. Sukuna immediately understood how it happened. Mahoraga had adapted to Limitless, bypassing not just Gojo's defenses but his own as well. After all, the technique Sukuna obtained through Orochi's power was essentially identical to its source. If Mahoraga could break through Gojo's Limitless, then Sukuna's was no exception. The instant Sukuna was pierced through the chest, he reacted. Megumi Fushiguro, unwilling to recklessly send Mahoraga into danger, intended to retreat after landing the strike. But before Mahoraga could disengage, a pair of hands gripped the blade firmly. The edge sank into flesh, caught by the bone beneath. Sukuna's arms, twisting unnaturally from under his ribs, delivered a devastating punch infused with Star Rage's overwhelming force. The blow struck Mahoraga from below, momentarily disrupting its movements. Flesh and bone cracked under the sheer impact, and the earth roared as Mahoraga's body was flung downward, crashing into the ground like a shadow of destruction. The ground liquefied under the impact, surging like a tidal wave. Yet Sukuna knew at once Mahoraga was not finished. At the same moment, Gojo Satoru was already closing in again.
That one!
Sukuna's single eye flicked toward Yuki Tsukumo. The strange strike he felt earlier could only mean she had adapted to Star Rage's pure physical might, just as Mahoraga had adapted to Limitless. His plan to crush Mahoraga was disrupted once again by Gojo's interference. A flurry of exchanges followed before Sukuna and Gojo halted simultaneously. Both, activating Limitless, manipulated their techniques to pierce through each other's defenses. Each strike became a contest of precision, cursed energy control, and timing. To any observer, it was a battle of endless adaptation and counter-adaptation. For Sukuna and Gojo, however, it was simply another test of mastery.
This is the power of Limitless.
Sukuna sneered.
Your technique truly is useful.
Above him, the Dharma wheel shifted ever so slightly. Yuji Itadori's attacks had slowed. His blows, no longer fatal, risked becoming adaptations for Mahoraga. At this pace, Sukuna's summoned Shikigami would soon nullify them entirely. Yuji understood. Now all he could do was disrupt Sukuna at crucial moments. Yuki Tsukumo and Kashimo Hajime struggled to intervene. Their attacks couldn't break through Limitless, and the risk of being caught and instantly killed loomed constantly. The main battle remained locked between Gojo Satoru with his domain mastery and Kamihara Hajime alongside Sukuna himself. All three wielded near-immortal endurance, and Sukuna, relying on Mahoraga lurking in his shadow, absorbed staggering amounts of punishment. The battle reached a deadlock. The battlefield had become unrecognizable. What was once a thriving urban district was now nothing but ruined scenes more desolate than any post-apocalyptic film. Thankfully, civilians had been evacuated long before, leaving only Hajime and the others within the barrier. Even the supervisors had withdrawn. Only one tool remained on the scene, the image-retaining Bird 2, a cursed corpse technique designed to transmit live footage. Developed with Mei Mei's help, it was broadcasting the fight back to Tokyo Jujutsu High. There, nearly every sorcerer had gathered, their eyes fixed on the screen. This single battle would decide the fate of the Jujutsu world, and perhaps even the entire nation. But no matter their determination, they couldn't intervene. Battles of cursed energy were not like sword fights of history. Numbers meant nothing against overwhelming power. Sukuna had proven that 1,000 years ago, if collective effort had worked, then Gojo Satoru himself would not have been feared into isolation by sorcerers and curses alike. Now, only one thing kept Sukuna in check: Kamihara Hajime's defiance of time itself. Without his ability to reverse the inevitable, casualties would already have been catastrophic. Maki murmured, her fists clenched. The dream realm, forged by Kenjaku through the Yasukani no Magatama, the Yada mirror, and the sacrifice of a special-grade cursed spirit, Dream Eater, had reshaped her. Her restriction was now complete. She no longer needed cursed tools to see spirits, and her physical ability had surged far beyond its old limits. But even so, it wasn't enough. For the first time, Maki realized how little recognition mattered to her anymore. What she wanted was strength, not for her clan, but to protect her comrades. Yet here she was again, powerless. She wasn't alone. Nobara Kujisaki, Inumaki, Panda, even Yaga Masamichi, none of them could accept sitting idly by. But reality remained cruel. The strong stirred storms, and the weak could only endure their waves.
Gojo won't lose, right? If he does, I'll leave before things collapse.
Mei Mei's calm, calculating voice broke the silence. Her loyalty had always been to profit, not battles. Yaga sighed.
Have some faith, Mei Mei. This is only the beginning.
Panda added.
Yeah, Hajime hasn't even shown his hand yet. He set himself there waiting for Sukuna's revivals to run out. Once that happens, it'll end.
Yaga nodded gravely.
Regardless of how this ends, Master Tenjin is gone. Barriers across Japan are collapsing. Re-establishing them will be our duty. Jujutsu High has already passed a resolution. Knowledge of cursed energy will be made available to all. Our numbers must grow.
Maki frowned.
That means curses will multiply too.
Yaga's gaze never left the screen.
They have their battle and we have ours. Let them fight. When they win, we'll carry the weight left behind.
Around him, Nobara and the others clenched their fists, silently vowing, I will catch up to them. Back on the battlefield, the deadlock broke. Sukuna and Gojo's domains shattered together, and Sukuna immediately unleashed an inferno arrow. Hajime's Shigure strengthened a time arrow, scattering it, but Gojo's 6 eyes picked up the surge of cursed energy flooding from Sukuna's body.
Move!
Gojo shouted. Kashimo Hajime reacted too late. A dragon shadow erupted from Sukuna's feet, blocking Megumi's Mahoraga while Blue dragged Kashimo into range. Sukuna was already prepared, his palm blade, glowing crimson, thrust forward with lethal precision. Kashimo forced Butsu Matama into overdrive, but Sukuna's grin widened. Red detonated, obliterating the lightning surge. His blade pierced straight through Kashimo's chest. Additional arms sprouted, ready to tear him apart. And then impact. Sukuna's body was wrenched off balance, hurled away by a familiar force. He recognized it instantly, Hajime's time technique, But know this timing was impossible. Hajime had just used it. His eyes snapped toward the source, not Hajime. It was Yuta Akatsu, cursed energy boiling at its limit. Domain amplification, technique copy, time wheel.
Kamihara Hajime.
Yuta roared.
It begins now.